Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the LGA. God damn it! 5 seconds. 5 seconds after I hit record. Thank you, Noel, for the sub. Always appreciate it. If you would like to put it towards something, please let me know. We're officially ignoring donations henceforth. Until the end. Let's go ahead and do this, for real. Nope, ignoring it, whatever it is. It's gone, it's dead. So, let's go ahead and talk about the LGA. So this is an idea by Bamber, specifically came up with the idea. Because one of the biggest problems, we used to do end-of-year streams. In fact, we did an end-of-decade stream, if you remember. That was fun. But as we were sitting here, I realized we just don't play that many games that came out in the year that they came out in, right? And I don't mind that, really. I don't think that's a big problem. We still play several games that come out when they come out. Those are actual premieres. And the other ones we just play whenever, right? That's cool, and I'm cool with that. The idea here, though, is Bamber's idea. Is why don't we just do the game of the year for the games we actually played that year, regardless of when they came out. If we played Super Mario Brothers and GTA 5 in the same year, then those would count at that same year, right? Make sense? And it was such a logical conclusion. I was like, dude, that makes so much sense. Let's just do that henceforth. Cool. So that's the LGA in a nutshell. We did have quite a few games from last year. We had a whole nomination phase. We had a recording phase, or a voting phase, excuse me. It all went pretty well. We've learned some things that we won't be doing next year, which I'll talk about as we go. But I do have plenty of information here and plenty of stuff. So let's just start at the top, shall we? So, make sure I have all my stuff right. Let me delete that really quick here. The first category, is game you were most inclined to buy thanks to the stream, right? Wrong. That's actually not the first category. The first category is a me-only category. Best co-op game of the year. Now, this was actually an interesting one because Pax and I have played a lot of co-op games in 2022. We played Grounded, we played Factorio, we played Satisfactory, we played Vermintide 2, we played Diggy Diggy Game. God, what's its actual name? I can't think of the name of it. We played Tor, although that doesn't count for this purpose. We played Far Cry 5 and Far Cry New Dawn. Both of those we played. And hang on, I'm opening up Steam right now because I can't think of the name of Diggy Diggy. We all call it Diggy Diggy. Thank you. Deep Rock Galactic. That's the game. Everybody just calls it Diggy Diggy Game. Tor doesn't count because I didn't play it with Pax. Off camera. Co-op games. So, none of that counts. We also played TMNT Shredder's Revenge, which, by the way, was freaking awesome. We have 100% of that. We also played Chronicles of Mystara, or whatever that's called. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It's an old Capcom arcade game, right? Arcade beat 'em up set in Mystara, which was an old D&D setting, and it's actually really cool. Like, it's probably one of the better designed beat 'em up games because you can actually, like, it's hard to explain, but there's actual like levels and branching paths and optional bosses and equipment and spell slots, and it's really, really cool. I played River City River City Girls 1. That was just with my niece, though, so that doesn't really count. I actually played a lot of games with my niece, which I'm also discounting from this list. But, yeah, this is just a me-only category. Actually, Pax suggested it. Because we played a crap ton. I know I'm missing some. We are always on the trawl for, yes, multiple endings too. We're always on the trawl for new co-op games, and thankfully there's been a resurgence in the last about 2 or 3 years of co-op games, so that has been awesome. But hang on one second. And then there's FF14, which is the anti-co-op game, so that's always fun. I've actually talked to him about FF14, and the conclusion is fairly strongly, unless they fix the co-op problem we both have with it, he's never coming back to it. And that's okay, I don't blame him. We also played A Way Out. That was the other one. I couldn't think of the name of it. Now, you're probably noticing the format here because I'm deliberately not mentioning the game that I think actually wins this for me, because the game that wins for me, despite all these games and all of them being fun, interesting, and enjoyable games. Oh yeah, we also beat Dying Light last year. Sorry, that's another one. We also played Portal 2. That's actually a good point. We also played Portal 2, but no. The winning game, I don't have any music set up for this one, sorry, because this is kind of an impromptu thing, but the winning game for the best co-op game of the year is It Takes Two. If you have not played It Takes Two, go play It Takes Two. That is the best review I could possibly give for it. It Takes Two is a very, very, very good 3D puzzle platformer. It uses its co-op fantastically. No, It Takes Two is the sequel to the Jail game. The Jail game is the one I mentioned earlier, which is A Way Out. Same developer. It is mandatorily, correct, Noel, it is mandatorily two-player. You have to have two people to play It Takes Two. But it works really, really well in that format. It's not just a typical co-op game. It's a game where the co-op really works for the sake of the game style. Just to name a very, very basic example off the top of my head, if I'm playing it with Rax, for example, Rax has a gun that freezes enemies, and I have a gun that actually destroys enemies, but only if they're frozen. And that applies to puzzle design as well as to encounter, bosses. Very fun and enjoyable bosses, very fun and enjoyable co-op. Absolutely love the puzzle design and the map design. There's this one section where there's just this really big city in the snow globe area, and we just roamed around there, having fun with that for like an hour. Not even progressing the plot, because there was just so many little fun little side things you could do. And that's the other thing. A Way Out has this same idea. So in A Way Out and in It Takes Two, there's the main stuff, and that's maybe 25% of the content. And I'm not memeing, because there's just side stuff. There's just so much side stuff. It doesn't mean anything. It isn't mandatory. It's just little fun extra things you can do, just for the hell of it. And there's a lot of it. Hugely recommend. So, also, the elephant, which was not the most terrifying scene for me. Oh, but I'm going to say one thing really quick. This is not a spoiler. A Way Out is a very rough game. Yeah, we had some issues with that. There's actually gunplay in A Way Out. It was terrible. But in It Takes Two, the parents are horrible parents. I need to say that. I need to say that out loud to somebody. Because, oh my god, they are such terrible parents. Okay, we're good. Moving on. So moving on to our first actual category. God, they're just so bad. I mean, I'm not a parent, I'm an uncle. And I still think they suck at it. All right, so I have not played A Tale of Two Sons co-op, no. The first actual category is... Oh, right, I'm an idiot. The first actual category is down here. Right, I actually set this up. So we're going to do your choice, and then we're going to do my choice. That's the format, right? So, the first choice, this is kind of a weird one, because the first category is the game you most wanted to buy thanks to the stream. Now, there were a lot of options here, and in fact, I've got the whole voted list here, and it's ranked choice, so this is probably as accurate as we're getting for this. A few people suggested Gree, Sunless Sea, Nox, Tales of Arise, Time Spinner, Once Upon a Jester, Cyber Shadow, Devil May Cry 5, Prey, A Plague Tale: Innocence, Wasteland 3, Grounded, Star Wars Tor, Outer Wilds, and Psychonauts 2. But the top three were interesting here, because the number 3 slot was the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which at the end got about 50% of the way towards winning. The number 2 slot was Final Fantasy XIV, which I was amused by. I believe that's literally one vote under what is needed to be in order to win. But the actual winner is Stardew Valley. Now, this doesn't really surprise me all that much, because we streamed Stardew Valley for the better part of, I believe, like 2.5 weeks. But this one did actually win out in the end. And if we look at the numbers on here, it makes sense, because more people picked FF14 for their first pick, but almost everyone picked Stardew Valley for their second or third or fourth pick. In other words, to put this into different terminology, Stardew Valley was highly recommended from basically everybody, even if it wasn't their first pick, which is kind of the method by which how ranked choice actually is supposed to work. So that makes sense to me, that it would actually end up winning in the end. Stardew Valley, I mean, retro is just a word, right? Nobody cares about words. Now, I do actually have my own answer to this game, to this category, even though it's kind of weird for me to answer this, because by definition, a game I would want to play for the stream is a game I've already bought because I streamed it. However, I wanted to give you a bonus game because I did actually buy Once Upon a Jester twice. I did actually buy it separate for my niece, specifically so that she could enjoy it and play it. But the actual game I was most excited to buy is Cyber Shadow. I have gushed a lot about this game. This game is turbo legit. And fun, brutal, extremely well designed, very tightly crafted, very few complaints. I did give a few, there were a few negatives. Obviously, we have the swag blade, which is just the best thing ever. This is, I had so much fun playing Cyber Shadow. I cannot gush enough about Cyber Shadow, and I highly recommend anybody out there who likes a punishing platformer, because let's be clear, that's what this is. I highly recommend going ahead and giving it a shot. But before we, sorry, I love that song. I just want to sit and let it play. But let's move on to the next category really quick. So hang on, let me pull up the next election, because the next thing is the best new meme, Loreium, or concept. Now, there were a bunch this year. Cash-in syndrome was something we codified this last year. I don't know what STO Starship porn means. I don't understand that, so we're going to move on from that. Chewing on concrete, which was something that we did several times in several games, aka when you have regenerative health when you're in cover. The emergency knife, which is something that I have actually continued to use several times since the game it came from. I'm not going to spoil, but some of you know which one that is. And of course we have It's Bad Luck to Be You, a song I'm not even going to hum because I don't want to get that stuck in your head. There's also the term storybook game. That's a new... Storybook game was a new concept. It's an idea of a game that you enjoy watching, but you have no real desire to play. And I'm sure off the top of your head right now, you can think of several storybook games, because there's a few of those. Also, Underthought. Underthought is the concept when someone... it's actually kind of hard to explain. I'll come back to that. The gay cowboy got a weirdly large number of votes. I'm not sure why. That wasn't really much of a meme. Black Licorice was on here. I thought that was a little confusing because I'm pretty sure Black Licorice predates this year, but I allowed it. So Black Licorice, of course, referring to something that I can intellectually understand other people like, but it gives me such a visceral negative reaction that I just can't process it. And of course, the number two thing is my tendency, which I am going to continue doing, to referring to terribly written villains as the Sister of Tekuvma. Bonus points if you get it. No, I'm not going to explain it, but we all know the winner. We all know the winner. The winner is Croatia. Because, of course, Croatia would be the one to actually win this, right? I mean, that just makes sense. In fact, for those of you wondering about the Croatia meme, I thought I'd go off and show off what happened here. So there's this section where you have the Mako relatively early on in Mass Effect. And you're doing this first stage. And I kept trying to jump over this thing and failing at it. It's actually surprisingly hard to do. And hang on, it's even worse because, for those of you not aware, we were playing the Legendary Edition. And the literal physics and controls are different in the Legendary Edition. So I was playing just off of the idea that it might be possible. I wasn't even sure it was actually possible to do in the Legendary Edition. So I was like, whatever, I give up. And I'm sitting here chatting, and I have a viewer named Croatia HF. And Croatia HF, at this point, jumps into chat and says, one more time! And I've been doing this for like 10 minutes. So I'm like, fine, one more time for Croatia! And I got over. The one time. I had given up. Croatia says do it. I did it. We made it. And I'm just sitting here jazzing about the fact that I actually made that jump. And after that, I said I'd never explain the Croatia meme, which I'm obviously violating here. I mean, I've explained it like 30 times at this point. But that's the Croatia meme in a nutshell, and that's why everything is for Croatia. This is in the highlight reel, obviously. And of course, that craft right there is no longer a Mako. It is the Croatia. But my personal answer to this is going to be this. So, here's the deal. You're probably wondering, what is Underthought? Underthought is my personal new phrase, my new Loreium, and I've already used it several times. I've already heard other people use it several times. I cannot believe the idea has never occurred to me before. Because Underthought is when a writer, especially for like something episodic, adds something to a story, whether it's a show, or a game, or a book, or a movie, and doesn't really think about it. It never really processes for them the consequences and the change that it would make to either the characters, or the world, or the setting. They just decide to add something because. It's such a endemic in terms of writing problem. And we mean aside from that, it's mostly covered and it's muted, Mr. Ed. In fact, for those of you, some of you recognize this episode, but for those of you who don't, this is the episode where we find out that every species in Star Trek all came from the original progenitors, which is a perfect example of Underthought. Although actually my personal favorite example of Underthought's over in Voyager. Now, just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Just in case. But I'm going to go ahead and use an episode of Voyager to really help explain what Underthought is. In an episode of Voyager, there is a scene, I don't even remember the episode, it doesn't even matter. There is a scene, yes, it absolutely is casual, where they're trying to prove that one of the crew member has been brainwashed or mind controlled, right? Has been replaced by another entity. It's okay. We have a way to prove this because Voyager scans the brainwaves of everybody on the ship constantly and keeps a record of them. Now, the reason that's a perfect example of Underthought, that is the textbook example of Underthought, is because that huge sea change to the setting, which should be a major world building point, which should be a discussion point, which is something people have pointed to for years as an example of how, dystopian Starfleet is only mentioned in one episode ever. And the only reason it existed was so they could use it as a tool to prove the point they were trying to make for the individual plot in the individual episode. We need to prove they're mind controlled. Okay, we scan brain. Cool, we're done. And that's it. That is Underthought in a nutshell. Because it's not the point itself that's the problem. The scanning brain thing, that could be a talkie point. That could be a dilemma point. You can have people's perspectives on that. Maybe some people just kind of live with it. They're not really happy with it, but it's something they tolerate. Or maybe it's something that one of the characters in particular is really against because they feel it's a violation of their privacy and they have to have a specific form requesting their brain as discussed. And there's all kinds of character and world building and plot stuff you can do with that, and none of it happens because it was Underthought. Because it was just there for one thing and never again. No, I don't even see it. Is the P30 serum? I don't know what that is. I'm sorry. Also, I think actually you're probably referencing Resident Evil 5 or 6, which I haven't played, as I remind you, so I have no idea. It happens very frequently. It is very common, and that's why that's my new personal favorite Loreium for the year, is because Underthought just... I know a lot of my own terms don't literally translate. If I say coffee, obviously coffee has just been spreading by virtue of usage. But if someone who's never heard of anything before hears coffee, they're not going to be like, huh? But Underthought self-explains. The phrase itself so immediately explains what it's about that I usually don't even have to go into the whole speech I just did. And that's awesome. Anyways. So, moving on. Next category is... oh, right, I'm sorry. I meant to give you a couple of things. So, one of the things was Croatia, obviously, and Sister of Takuvma, definitely fantastic. But I do have to mention one other little meme, which I don't have here for you, unfortunately. But you can find it, because it's still one of my most viewed clips of the last year on Twitch. It's when my sister, while we were playing Stardew Valley together, got my little niece, and dragged her over to the mic and said, "Can you say Uncle Lorebro is evil?" And in the most adorable voice that exists, my niece says, "Uncle Lorebro is evil." And I died from adorability overload. By the way, that is in the highlight reel, because of course it is. Anyways, had to call that out for anybody who wasn't there for that, because holy crap. Anyways, most game you've never heard of until it was streamed. I know it sounds like bad grammar, but no, it makes perfect sense. Because as I explained to Ivo Iliani, who specifically had a question about this is a gradient, right? So let's say there's some random esoteric horror game. Now, I'm not into horror. You can go to youtube.com. It's on the original channel. It's on Highlights Reel channel. So no, it makes sense because it's a gradient, Rex. It makes perfect sense. An esoteric horror game is something I probably wouldn't have heard of, but because of the fact that so many of my friends and my show circles around horror games, I am more likely to find out about a horror game than I am about something completely unknown, right? So that, like I said, there's a bit of a gradient here. So let's go at your categories here. So at the bottom, with 0 votes, this amuses me. Why were these even suggested if they got 0 votes? We have Prey, Wasteland 3, and Nefarious, which is funny because Nefarious is like, I would never heard of that either. We actually had a lot of esoteric games this last year. We had Time Spinner, we had Pokemon Snap, Franbo, of course, Quest for Glory series, the Stanley Parable. I was a little surprised by that one. Tiny and Big, which is a game most of you probably don't remember right now, even though we streamed it last year. Nox, same. Cyber Shadow, Tex Murphy, The Tesla Effect, VA11 Hall A, also known as Valhalla, Skyborn, The Bard's Tale, but way up at the top we had 3, which were way at the top. And in the number 3 slot was Once Upon a Jester. I'm a little surprised that one wasn't actually higher, because Once Upon a Jester is such an unknown game that it doesn't have a Wikipedia page, and it doesn't have a TV Tropes page. At least when I checked, which was obviously a few weeks ago at this point. So you're hungry wolf. So that one is pretty esoteric, but it's okay, because the one that won the number 2 slot was Head On, which I continue to stutter on how to pronounce it, because god damn it. But that is a first-person shooter. Nope, that's a lie. It's actually an RPG built in the Doom engine that we played that Mr. Red may or may not care about. But that actually isn't the winner. No, the actual winner, and I know this is going to completely shock you, I need to unmute this, is Secret of the Stars. Now, this actually surprised me a little bit that this one was this high on the list, because this game has actually achieved a small bit of notoriety specifically for the fact that it is terrible. This is a garbage game. We did actually give it the garbage tag, and it is really, really, really bad. But obviously, a lot of people voted. In fact, when I say a lot of people voted for it, I mean this was everyone's. If we did first past the post, which obviously we don't because it's a terrible, terrible voting system that nobody should reviews ever, this would still have won. A lot of people picked this for the number 1 slot, and a lot of people picked it for 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and so forth and so on. So a huge number of people picked this game. So obviously, I'm wrong, and a lot of people know about this game. Now, of course, this isn't my personal. I keep forgetting to do this. Here, let's go down to Runner. Oh, it's actually screwed up, isn't it? It is screwed up. Why are you screwed up? Oh, I know why. Yep, I know exactly why. There we go. So for my personal pick, there's obviously a lot of random esoteric games we've played this year. Valhalla, as I already mentioned, was a game I'd never heard of. Ion Fury was a really weird esoteric one. Sunless Sea was something I never even heard of until we played it. Nefarious, ditto. The Magic Circle, ditto. I'd never heard of Head On until Mr. Red mentioned it to me. I never heard of Skyborn until Alex mentioned it to me. I never heard of Franbo until it got funded. I never heard of Valiant Hearts, even though that was actually a AA game, which got a lot of press. I just never heard of it. Nox, of course, back in the day, back when I wasn't playing video games. Paradise Killer, which I knew nothing about whatsoever. And of course, Once Upon a Jester. But actually, Yes, we did play and stream and reviewed the Magic Circle last year. But the one I'm actually going to go with, for my personal, is Tiny and Big. Now, how many of you even recognize this game off the top of your heads? Be honest with yourselves for a second. I actually have a term for this. This is a concept game. It's not really a video game. It's kind of a physics-y game. As you can see, as I'm demonstrating here, you can chop stuff, and you can grab stuff, and you've got like a thing that pushes, a thing that pulls, and a thing that slices. And you're supposed to physics your way through the game. Yeah, it's a tech demo in simplicity. And so you can do things like put a little rocket here, and then just go... and then fail at it because you have too much weight on it. But, that's it. That's kind of the game. It was this weird random game about going after a dude because he stole your underpants. I'm not making that up. So, this is absolutely the most I've never heard of game. Because while some of the other games, there's a chance or a possibility of it entering my wheelhouse or somebody mentioning it or something, this was so out of left field that like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if several people still didn't remember me streaming this, even though we did actually go all the way through the game, and the last boss sucked. Because it did. But going back up here for a moment. Moving on. We've also... What's the next category? The next category is the worst cutscene or moment of the year. So there weren't a lot of nominations for this one. There was something for Quest for Glory, which got no votes. There was something for Beyond Good and Evil, which got no votes. There was Metal Gear Solid, which got 1 vote. There was the finale for Xenos over in Final Fantasy XIV, which got 2 votes. The intro to Mass Effect 3, which got 3. The confrontation scene between the Jedi Knight and the Emperor in Tor, that got 4. The Mass Effect 3 ending, which is in the number 3 slot, got a decent chunk, but actually only about like 15 or so. Just about 15 or so, right? So that leaves the top 2. And the number 2 slot was Kai Leng Escaping, which is, yeah, that makes sense. A lot of people voted for that, but even more people voted for one other scene. I've spoken against this scene since it came out. One of the first videos that ever got me noticed on YouTube was this scene. And as I was talking about it, and as I was discussing it, it just kind of, as I started to process and discuss it, I started to realize how bad it is. And I started to really understand just how bad it is. But it's surely I'm wrong. Surely I'm wrong. Then we did the lore run. You remember that? And when we did the lore run, I realized this scene was actually even worse than I thought. But that's okay. Surely I'm wrong. It's been like 7 or 8 years. It's all good. And I've gotten a lot better at analyzing fiction. I have a lot more experience under my belt. I know what I'm doing a lot more. It's cool. So let's go ahead and do the Mass Effect 3 review. And this goddamn scene is so bad. Because we really, really, really went in depth on this one during the recent review. It wasn't even that long ago. It was a few months ago. And whatever you think about this scene, it's actually worse than that. Because it's one of those things where you zoom in the camera more and you start to see just how many ways, even like in terms of structure, in terms of scene construction, in terms of dialogue, in terms of sentence and word design, everything about this scene is terrible. This scene got so many negatives. There's only one other individual thing this whole year that got more negatives for one specific thing, and we'll get there because that's on this list too. This garbage is garbage. And if you remember, Mass Effect 3, I was pretty positive several times. But this one scene can go die in a fire. Now, over on my side of things, so there were several really, really bad scenes and cutscenes. I mean, the wormhole in Shattered Universe, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon completely ruining its own ending. Tale of Arise's ending, which was so bad that Pax and I spent like 10 minutes riffing on how bad it was after I finished that one up. Everything in Secret of the Stars, just every scene in Secret of the Stars. Devil May Cry 2's ending, which is just oh my god. But no, my personal favorite ending, my personal favorite pick for the worst cutscene or moment. I mean, come on. It's one of the worst individual cutscenes in gaming history, and I am not being facetious about that. It is actually worse than it otherwise would be because of what led up to it, because of what built up to it. There are terrible, terrible scenes in Right Hell Retribution. I should know. I've done a lore run of that game. But those scenes are in a schlock game of garbage. This, being here, imagine going to a nice restaurant with some good freaking food, and you're enjoying yourself. And there's been some, you go the third time, and there's some issues and there's some problems, but for the most part, you're still with it, and the staff are really nice. And then you get this. Someone just comes out with a garbage can and dumps it out in front of you, and you throw up on the spot. That is this. And it's made even worse by the fact that it's immediately followed by the goddamn Crayola ending. But this specific scene, and there's a reason we divvied these up, this specific scene is terrible. I cannot summarize. The only way I can say to really go in depth in how bad this is, please go watch the review. We really dig into it more than we ever have before. We actually pull out the scalpel, and holy crap, screw this scene. Let's get some positivity in here, shall we? Best cutscene or moment. Let's see here. So, oh, we had lots of nominations. Lots of nominations. Hang on, Jay Palmer. Let me double check. No, the furthest down that scene was for anybody was at 4th pick. Nobody put it below 4th pick, Jay Palmer. To put it that way. Most people put it as their first pick. Like 40 people put it as their first pick. So it's landslided. It completely landslided everything else, even the ending. So best cutscene. You guys suggested quite a few. There's spider hunting in Grounded. Not really a cutscene, but I'm with it. It was cutscene or moment, and that was a fun moment. For those of you who weren't there, you're probably thinking, why is spider hunting so awesome? It was when we had gotten the gear and the coordination to go after the things that had been hunting and hounding us the entire game, and we just made a kill squad and went around and just started massacring the wolf spiders. It was actually quite fun. There's Sam's Pancakes in Psychonauts 2, points if you get it. There's the ending of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, the one that was ruined, but it was a good ending in a vacuum. There's everything to do with the Master in Fallout 1. There's the opening cinematic, A Space Marine. All of these things got 0 votes. So moving forwards a little bit, we have the ending of Valiant Hearts. Enough said. Pretty sure that one pulled tears out of me. Now I'm going to explain this one because there's a cutscene that didn't get a lot of votes, but it was the giant ripping his leg off. So in Elden Ring, as we're going through Elden Ring, there's this giant who we're fighting, and then he's like, he goes into his phase transition, and he rips off his own leg, and just kind of clumbles to the ground, and he pulls his own leg up like it's a club, and then as soon as the cutscene ended, he died. Now, that is a bug that has since been fixed for the curious, but when we streamed it, you included something from Elden Ring, Kay. This is your guys. It's Walkers. But I'm just sitting there like, what? What happened? It was a bug. So he had a bleed on him, and so he kind of died. He died during the cutscene. That, like I said, that has been since fixed. But it was just hysterical because if you think about it, it makes so much sense. He ripped off his own leg and then died immediately. Of course he did. Anyway, sorry. So then we had everything to do with Leviathan in Mass Effect 3. The cutscene with Hearts Aligned with FF14, which I'm saying vaguely to avoid spoilers. Speaking of avoiding spoilers, the one last song moment in Outer Wilds. Yeah. The ending of Shadowbringers, that's specifically the one with Alize when we're back on our planet. Devil May Cry 5, where Nero, almost said Dante, Nero insists, I'm not letting you die. Pretty good scene. One of the better scenes in that game, actually. The 5.3 ending in FF14. Several FF14 things. Don't worry, it's not the end of the FF14s, because then we have the fleet reaching Earth. I'm surprised how many votes that one got. By the way, this is an escalating order, if you're wondering. So 0 votes up to the thing. It's just making it clear in case I didn't earlier. There's a scene in Titanfall 2. I have done the math. Oh, come on! I was just posing! And Random's like, I hate you, and I hate your pose. I have done the math. Great scene. Great scene. Then we have the ending of Lufia 2, which, if you remember, the entire outro of Lufia 2 got a lot of positives, so that makes sense. There's another FF14 cutscene. Although, I don't know if cutscene's the right word. See, we're fighting Kefka, and it's a really, really great fight. I actually rewatched the VOD just to find the exact moment, and I was having so much fun with that fight, and we're just having a great time, and I die, and everything's cool, and then Rax decides to blow the limit break. And for those of you who understand that, you already get it. But on the off chance that you don't, so you get one limit break, basically, across the party, right? So Rax is a DPS, and him blowing that means the healer couldn't use the limit break, which would allow us to res everybody and win. But Rax instead decided, you know what, I've decided to blow this and just do a bunch of damage here. Because Raximus was secretly paid off by Kefka, and I don't blame him. You gotta make money somehow, but I want that moment to live forever in infamy. But that's still only 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th on the list, because in 5 is Vinaz Sundering, which I'm saying very vaguely. But for those of you who've played FF14, you know what I'm talking about. In the number 4 slot, we have the Citadel Party from Mass Effect 3. Yeah, that was pretty legit. We did actually win the fight, despite Rax. Number 3, this one... So, okay, I should probably mention, the scale is like hardly anybody, hardly anybody, hardly anybody, hardly anybody. And then a huge number of people voted for Croatia, which I feel like is a little bit of double dipping. But it's okay, because that's only the number 3 one. Because the number 2 one with way more votes is the FF14 Lorerunner credits, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that's still not the one that won, because the thing that won, the greatest moment, the greatest cutscene of 2022... Yeah, honestly, this is one of the best single cutscenes in the Mass Effect trilogy, or quadrology if you prefer. And again, one of the little side effects when you zoom in the camera, as far as we do for these reviews, especially for a re-review, is you really start to go into detail on how something is good and bad, like I mentioned earlier with the Starchild scene. So this was a very, very well done scene. Honestly, don't have much to add to that. Yes, I do. Because the really, really great part about this thing... He does sing, but that's not what Yura means. The really funny thing about this scene is it can go multiple ways. There's so many different methods that this can go, depending on your choices built up to this. And that's the other thing that really pushes this scene so high up on the list, at least for me personally, is because, yeah, there's the scene, which is the one we showed off for the review, but then there's the scene where you don't convince him, or there's the scene where things go badly, or there's the scene where you pull out the gun. And there's so many different ways I can... And what's funny is all of them are well done. All of them were interesting or engaging, or at the very least, good. Huge props to this scene. I don't have much else to say about that. But I should probably go and mention my personal take on things. So there were a few cutscenes that really sang for me this year. Devil May Cry 4's intro, which nobody else actually mentioned, which was a surprisingly good intro. The Morden scene that we just saw. The entirety of the Lufia 2 outro. Pretty much everything about the factory in Super Mario RPG, which I gushed about when we got there. And of course, this is the scene where he kills you from Portal 2. And I also have to give special praise to the Matzia scene in FF14 for a scene that I can't talk about or explain without spoiling, and I'm not going to do that. But holy crap is all I can say about that. But that's still not the best scene, because the scene for me... So, yeah, the outro for the Lorerun, for the FF14 Lorerun. Actually, just because I wanted to make sure you actually get to see this properly. Is it here? Nope, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one, too. Where is it? Did it move? Hello? Did the file move on me? Whatever, I can rebuild it. Because I have the image right here. There. It was in perfect position, everything. Whatever, screw it. I had the whole thing lined up just so it would perfectly sit right on top of the existing logo. And then something somewhere screwed up, like it always does. Whatever. Well, you know what? We're just going to do it this way. Here. So this is the actual logo. This is... Raximus threw this together, although he didn't do it by himself, of course. But really, the outro credits sequence, which of course I cannot actually show you because it's extraordinarily spoilery, was brilliantly done and hugely emotional for me, and of course involved a large number of actual people. And these actual people, all of the people you're seeing here are actually people who were playing along the FF14 lore run with me. It was just this incredibly great moment of awesome and fantastic and community, for lack of a better way to put it. And nothing else can reach this. Nothing else can attach this. Honestly, this might be the best moment in our streaming history for me, just because of how big of a deal this was from a completely meta perspective, from a perspective of the community. Like I'm stumbling over myself because I don't know how else to put this. And I can recognize so many of these. Which direction are you at? Where are you? Are you this way? No, you're this way. There you are. All of these people, I can recognize almost all of these people on site. There's USN Corp kind of posing with the book there. We've got Luneruth over here. Brigwin's up there in the back. There's Zira right over the next to that. Over there is Anixia. I can't actually remember who that is username-wise. There's Mr. Red on the far left. There's Giga Pudding posing as usual. I don't know who that tall dude is in the middle. He's some loser. There's Reggie. There's Rax. There's Valerian. I'm going to stop. There's a lot of people here. It was just such a great moment to encapsulate everything that we'd been through across what I believe was like a 50-day stream. So, yeah, Terra's there. Actual height, yeah, I am a giant. We all know I'm just a colossal giant. Lots and lots of people. There's Maverick. I think I already mentioned Luneruth. There's Ryo Kami. I don't know if she's even here right now. It's almost a shame. FF14 is such a very strange... please do, Rax, because I'd love the idea. Although, don't do it yet. But if you want to start thinking ideas, because I'd love to have, the more custom stuff we have, the better, right? Yeah, I know, this is a lot of people, right? This is so many people who came together for this. And some of these people were only here periodically, or like once or twice. But lots and lots of people, and... Growing up, I used to move a lot. We used to just bounce all over the place, right? And so I didn't really have... Like, I was the kid that got along with everybody. That was my shtick. But part of that meant that as soon as I left, those people were just gone from my life, and then new people would slot in. It was very surface level, for lack of a better way to put it, right? My first really long-term friend was Pax, who I didn't meet until 1999. And so as a result of that sort of roamer mentality, as a result of that whole thing, I got into this thing where I really wanted something like a community. I wanted to have that local, neighborly thing. It's one of the things I really liked about the My Little Pony series. Is, I know that sounds strange, but you know, in Ponyville specifically, you know, people can literally just walk across the way and meet someone who they know who is part of that, you know, that town, and be like, hey, can you do this or whatever. It's just I've always wanted that because of how I grew up, and I've never really had that until, well, now. Until I started streaming. Until, you know, you get it. You get it. So, I don't know what else to add to that. I'm gonna stop being stupid. Yeah, Mass Effect stole my shoes, and God, that's just a weird domino, isn't it? Think about how many things have happened because of that domino. There should be 2 Lullafels here. I know there's one. There's Valerian in the upper left, but I thought there was another one. I could be wrong. Not a lot of people play Lullafels, but that's okay, because even less people play Elizon. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are 2 Elizons on this screen. Me and Ewis and Corp. I'm double checking. Think about how many... Yeah, I was going to say Kata should be here, but I don't see... Oh, there they are. Right there. Yep, I didn't even see them. See, I was right. There's 2 Lullafels, there's 2 Elizons. And then there's like 50 bunnies. It turned into a joke. Because, listen, Valvedrix is right there. Sorry, there's 3 Elizons. I don't know why I thought Valvedrix was a bunny. But it turned into a joke, because we were doing like a random guessing game sort of a thing, where we got to do dungeons. And at least at one point, I'm pretty sure at least more like 4 points, it was like me, and then 3 cat girls. And by cat girls, I mean bunny girls. I don't know why I said cat girls. Me and bunnies. Occasionally there was a bunny boy, but there's always bunnies. Anyways, I'm sorry. Getting off topic. So, I hate to stall this wonderful music, but it's going to play for like another 5 minutes, so moving on. Next category. So let's go back up to the walkers here. Most coffee. Now, I had to explain this one a couple of times. This is the year of the bunny. Most coffee. So, most people know what coffee is and how coffee works, but let's run through it really quick just to make sure. Coffee is something that you can mentally and emotionally acknowledge as, yeah, that's well done. It's well constructed, it's well written, it's well cooked, it's well whatever, right? It is something that is good, it's just not for me. I've mentioned that because that's sort of its own thing, right? Its own category, as opposed to just something you don't like. There's a difference between something you don't like and something you don't like that you can still acknowledge as good. I originally came up with that term because nobody liked my original term for that, which was Elvis. And I used to refer to it for a lot of things like the Battlestar Galactica reboot. As I've mentioned before, the term coffee actually predates the show. That's how long I've been using that terminology, so it's just kind of natural for me to refer to it as. But the idea was, what's the most coffee game for you that we streamed over the year? So there were a couple of contestants. God of War 3, which boggles my mind, but then again, I've heard that Mario Odyssey is coffee for someone, so what the hell do I know? Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of the Sky. Excuse me, Explorers of Sky, because grammar can go to hell, and yes, the bot is actually down right now. Because this isn't really the place for that. Then we have Psychonauts, which is weird, because I can't acknowledge that Psychonauts is good, because it's not. Then we have Okami HD, which I also can't acknowledge is good. Devil May Cry 3, okay, I'm with you on that one. Because Devil May Cry 3 is a game I've actually heard several people refer to as being coffee. Mass Effect 1, yeah, I can see that. The entire Spyro Reignited trilogy, yeah. Grounded. The Talos Principle, curious one, but okay. Soma, not sure I agree that's a good game, but moving on. Super Mario RPG, with it. Hades, no surprise. Mortal Kombat 11, yep. And then we got the top three. Now, the top three amuse me, because as usual, everything I just mentioned is over here in terms of votes. And then we jump up to this for our number 3 slot, which is Final Fantasy XIV. That doesn't surprise me at all, because I actually know several people, including my best friend, who, both of them actually, who think about FF14 as coffee. It's a good game, just really not for them. No surprise, no real judgment there. But that's actually funny, because that is then dwarfed by the number 2 slot. So, like, we've got this many votes for FF14, and then we've got this many votes for Star Trek Online. That one brought a smile to my face, honestly. This one only didn't win by 1 vote. Star Trek Online came very, very close. It's in the number 2 slot there. Because Star Trek Online is actually a surprisingly good game, despite the fact that it's Star Trek Online and all of the flaws and problems. So it's something that if someone told me, oh man, I wish I could get into STO, but it's STO. Yeah, that tracks, right? For pretty much all the same reasons that FF14 did. Which, of course, brings me to the actual winner. Try to be surprised. So, this is an interesting one, really. Because it tracks, right? Well, I do actually have issues and problems with this game, and I do personally think that it still has, it's not the greatest game ever made, and I don't think it's a new paradigm on game design, which some reviewers actually said. But what I do think is that this is a game that is good. This is the perfect encapsulation of coffee. There is some very good design here, some good world design, some good boss design, some good encounter design, good variety of the builds, good variety of the gear. Lots of cool stuff. The mobility, the increase in the mobility was a huge plus for me, personally. But, and yeah, Rax just said this, and Takoda just said this too, it's a Dark Souls game. It is a Dark Souls game, fundamentally at its very core. And I don't mean that facetiously, I mean that very demonstrably and literally. So, this is a pretty coffee game. And I'm just going to let this play for a second, because this is the time I actually killed Malenia. By the way, did you know that I all bossed this game without cheating? And I only mention that, and I'm only saying that out loud here, because one of the most common comments I've gotten on YouTube is that I just don't get these games because of the fact that I haven't been able to play them and beat them without cheating. Which is funny, because I don't think I've ever cheated in a Dark Souls game unless you count Sekiro, which obviously I do not, because Sekiro is its own thing. So I have killed... This is actually the time where we kill her. I'm just going to spoil that. This is the successful attempt. It's like attempt 6 or so. I'm not going to try and brag. Still not my thing. Well, if they can't co-op as cheating, then they're stupid. That's right, I also beat Bloodborne without cheating. And I beat every boss in Bloodborne except for 3 without co-op. For whatever that's worth. But anyways. Hang on, just really quick. There we go. Got her! Actually, no, hang on. See, this is kind of my setup. I was very bursty in terms of the build I had going. And so the whole idea was do a ton of damage in a short period of time, and then sit back and dodge for like a minute. Yeah, no, the strategy I came up with very quickly was if you jump into the rot, she is super vulnerable there. But if you pay attention, I'll even show you. I timed it. I got used to the timing in my head. Notice I don't jump in immediately, I jump in at that point. I do a jumping attack, too, to make sure to get that initial swing in. And then burst, burst, dead. So that's how I got through her, for anybody curious. And we did that without co-op, before you ask. Anyways, but now you have to hear, of course, mine. So, down here in my stuff, I didn't have that many coffee games this last year. Because, again, coffee isn't a game I don't like. Coffee is a game that I know is good, that I acknowledge is good, that I don't like. And most of the games that I didn't like last year, I don't think are very good games. So I only came up with a grand total of 3 games that got the coffee tag last year. So those would be, in no particular order, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now, I know this is going to hackle some people, but honestly, while that's a pretty decent... oh my god, Summicom. That's a pretty decent fighter game, and it is a good game. It's really not my thing. I don't like the very approach to it. I've never liked the knockoff style of combat. I prefer having an actual health bar. And more to the point, that the story mode of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate sucks. It's bad. It's bad. It's really bad. The next one is, of course, Sunless Sea. Now, this is a strange one, because Sunless Sea is very much not my thing. But it's surprisingly well designed overall, to the point where I'm actually kind of curious how Sunless Skies is going to go if that game ever gets funded and we get there. Sunless Sea, for those of you not aware, is kind of a roguelite where you play a ship in a giant alien world underground. You know, it's just a giant lake thing. And the world can get mapped around and some other things can get randomized. But the point is, you're supposed to die or go insane or be killed a lot. And you just kind of do what you can to get through that. There's multiple endings you can aim for. And it's its own little thing. It's very unique, and I will never play it again. Which, of course, leads me to the actual most coffee game. This one's probably going to surprise anybody who didn't see this stream. Because the thing is, this is a very well-made game. And it is. I could tell that the moment I picked it up. It has tremendous visual and audio design to it, and there's several things that they've done well with regards to kit, with regards to encounter design, but everything about this game shoved me away from it from the moment I picked it up. And it was such a weird thing that it took me, honestly, a good day and a half to even start processing why I wasn't enjoying it. One of my biggest memories of this game was at the end of the first day's stream. I forget, but somebody in chat was asking, you know, what do you think about this game? And I thought about it, and I responded something along the lines of, well, if I was enjoying myself, it would be this and this and that and that. And they said, oh, so you're not enjoying myself. And I paused because I didn't mean that, really, until I realized that I totally did, because I wasn't. I was not enjoying myself. I was despising the thing. And there are specific fundamental flaws with the game. There are actual gameplay flaws with this that do make playing it kind of crap. It also makes perfect sense to me that so many people would love this game so much, and this is something we talked about just this last year. People tend to value visual and audio presentation more than game design. I don't mean that as an insult, I mean that as an observation. I've just noticed this over the years, that a game that has good music or good visuals or a unique presentation, Okami HD, people will be like, yeah, that game's awesome, but it's not. And I don't mean that to sound insulting. What I mean is that there are fundamental game design flaws with them that nobody talks about, because all everybody cares about is the visual, the audio, right? And let's be clear, this is a visually gorgeous game, and it had wonderful sound design and wonderful music, and I'm with all of that. But the whole time I was going through, it felt like it was off. It was very off. And so this is coffee for me, because it is a good game, and no judgment to anybody who likes it. Hopefully no judgment towards me. But, yeah. No thank you. Consequently, the next category is, of course, most sushi. Let's explain that one really quick. Javan came up with the term sushi, because one time we were sitting there and we're like, What's the inverse of coffee? So coffee is something that we can acknowledge is good that we don't like. Sushi is something that we really like regardless of how good it is. So it's a game that for you is something that you really like regardless of how good or bad it is. And that's the essence of sushi, right? Now, obviously, some very good games are sushi, but that's not the point of it. A sushi game is a game that just clicks with you, regardless of all other considerations. That's also why it's not part of the review system, because it has nothing to do with quality, right? So, you guys, this is hysterical. I know this is a continuing trend, but we've got like 1 vote each for Quest for Glory 1, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, God of War 2, Cyber Shadow, Call of Duty Modern Warfare R, Sunless Sea, Return of the Obra Dinn, Cadence of Hyrule, God of War 3, Lufia 2, Psychonauts, Titanfall 2, Talos Principle. All of those just got 1 vote each. And then obviously got knocked off immediately. But then we have Suikoden 1, which looks like got 5 votes. Star Trek Online, which got 6, Prey, which got 7, Devil May Cry 5, which got 8, Hades, which got 9, and Elden Ring, which got 10. Oh, and then Stardew Valley, which got 11. Now, I keep giving you those numbers because then we have the number 2 slot, which had an astonishing 33 votes total for it. And that is Final Fantasy XIV. That doesn't surprise me all that much, FF14 being that high, because FF14 feels a lot of MMOs, really, feel like they fit the thing of sushi game. Right? They're a game that you enjoy regardless of how good or bad they are. But then even FF14 was absolutely dwarfed by... Now, I get it. I get why people voted for this. But I almost feel like this is in violation of the spirit of what sushi means. Because Mass Effect 2 is a very good game. It's one of the highest rated games we've ever reviewed. It has good gameplay and it has good story. It is still a sushi game, that's fine, but again, it does feel like this is almost cheating to put this at the very, very top of the list. But an inordinate number of people voted for this. So much so that it, like I said, it completely stomps it. 45 total votes. I don't actually have much else to add to this, other than the obvious things that I just mentioned. I mean, there is such a thing as bad sex, Rax. I'm going to stop talking about that. All right, so... now, what's really funny here is now we have to go ahead and give my sushi game. Now, I looked at the games that we covered over the last year, and I mentally ejected all the good games from the sushi list. So there's the sushi games, and I removed all of the ones that I considered actually good games. So that left exactly 2 games that I considered sushi that were not good. And those games are Star Trek Online, or sorry, no, I'm saying that wrong. Tor and... yeah, I already gave it away. And Star Trek Online. This game is the definition of sushi for me. It is a cheap, flawed, problematic game. It's just look at it. Just look at how stiff it is. And yet, I love this game so much. I played this game last night. I will be playing this game next Tuesday in order to go ahead and get the anniversary stuff in. This game, it's flawed, and it's got so many microtransaction problems, and it's been getting worse. And there's the dilithium issue, which we talked about at length. And yeah, everything's too big because of the camera issues. The animations are barely there. But God, I love this game so much! And I think there's 2 big things for this. So, Mr. Red was asking me during the Secret of the Stars run, I think it was Mr. Red, why Drakengard is not a lamentation, but Secret of the Stars is a lamentation. And the key difference is, even though I can't stand either game, because I think Drakengard is a total crap game. I think you responded to it. That's why I was thinking of your name, Mr. Red. Even though, you know, Drakengard is, in my opinion, very firmly not a good game. It was made by people who were trying to make a good game, who wanted to do this, who wanted to actually put out and put some real passion and thought and effort into the game, even if the result was garbage. And the example I used, and this is in the Secret of the Stars highlight reel, which is going live a week from today, the example I gave was, I want you to imagine a school play being put on by a bunch of 10-year-olds. Now, they're 10. And they don't have, fancy tech, and they don't have a big fancy set. They don't have anything. So the play they're going to put on is bad. But those kids put their heart and soul in it and really try and really put forth their best effort into it. And that's the difference between something like Secret of the Stars and STO. This game was made by fans of the series, fans of the franchise, who really loved what they did, who jumped into this job despite the fact that it was a sinking ship. STO was a dying franchise, a dying MMO, when other people actually picked up, technically the third people, but we talked about that. Yeah, made by fans for fans. And that comes with all the baggage that implies, because it's not perfect, but it also comes with all the good that implies. Yeah, it's the total freaking opposite of CBS, and I mean that sincerely. This is not made by a committee trying to put out the most safe, profitable product possible. This is made by people who are like, let's make the best Star Trek game that we can, and they did. This is, in my honest opinion, the best Star Trek game we've ever had, and I stand by that. And it sucks. And that's why this is Sushi. Also, God, that ship is so stupidly big! Anyways, moving on. Let's move on to our next category. Now, this is a funny one. So, now we have to do Best Side Character. Now, this has been a learning experience, because the term side character was not as well defined as it could be. We've already decided that, there were two, actually, Broccoli Soup. We've already decided that there's going to be more divisions of characters. I forget the exact division right now off the top of my head. It's going to be like main character, main party, side, pure NPC, and then main villain, secondary villain, right? And so we're going to spread that out a little bit. Because, yeah, if we just say side character, that is a huge spread of characters. That's basically everyone except for the main cast, and even the term main cast is kind of vague. Like, who's the main cast of FF6, just to name one example, or who's the main cast of Deep Space Nine? It's like, so yeah, we're gonna spread it out more next year, but we were too late to come up with that this year, so this is gonna be a little bit biased. So having said that, for your guys' vote, let's go up to the Walker. You guys voted for Sam from Psychonauts 2 with 0 votes, Hugo from Plague Tale with 0 votes, Lady from Devil May Cry 3 with 0 votes. But then we got a whole bunch of 1 votes. Otacon from Metal Gear Solid, Hornet from Hollow Knight, Estinian from FF14. He got 1 vote. That's funny. The Pro from The Magic Circle, raise eyebrow. The Narrator from The Bard's Tale, Nico from Devil May Cry 5, Tia from Lufia 2, Ronnie from Elden Ring, and those all got 2 votes. Then we got a couple more votes, a little more spread out for the Elusive Man from Mass Effect 2 specifically, Al Chiffon from Final Fantasy 14, The Bucket from Stanley Parable, who beat the Elusive Man. I just want you to think about that for a minute. My Sister from Stardew Valley got a weirdly large number of votes. Hythlodaeus from Final Fantasy 14, Rex, specifically from Mass Effect 1, Garahatia from Final Fantasy 14, and then we've got our top 2. As usual, these 2 kind of stomp everything else. So the number 2, we've got Morden from Mass Effect 2, specifically. That's a little surprising for me, just a little bit. But I do kind of like, I get it. It's just, I'll talk about it in a minute, because the actual winner for you, and I try to be surprised, the actual winner for you is going to take a second, because I designed this to loop, and because of the reasons I'm going to do it. But yeah, the actual winner for you guys is Garrus. Yeah, Lore Shock. Because, and this is the problem. This is such a vaguely defined category that it was, of course, it was going to be a Mass Effect character, and Garrus was very much in the running for being on top of that. There's no way this was going to go anywhere else, to be completely honest with you. I don't even have anything else to add to this. I will say that Garrus wasn't that much of a character in Mass Effect 1, but then he became an awesome character in Mass Effect 2. And he's one of the very few characters that continued to be awesome in Mass Effect 3, alongside Joker, actually, and Mordin, consequently. So, yeah, that's that. But I suppose we should tell you mine. No, so obviously, I tried to look at this from a little bit of a different perspective. So, I was looking at it from the perspective of side characters. So, I came up with a huge list of side characters here. Hackett, Anderson, Fordola, Gus, Risha, Blizz, Galt, Scorpio, Vet, Garrick, Kira, Odo, Quark, Harry Kim, Rebecca Dorothy Willow Graham, had to say that correctly, and Booster. All of those are what I would actually consider side characters, because that's the mentality I was coming into it with. I was like, okay, those are side characters. And you'll notice, while some of those are companion characters, all of them are some of the more lesser companion characters. There's a bunch from Tor, there's a bunch from STO, there's several from FF14, a couple in 14. Sam isn't too big to be a side character, she's just not on my list. Because the deck was stacked here. This is part of the problem we had. We covered 3 MMOs last year. Come on. But there was one who came to the very, very top for me, and I'm probably going to get some flack for this. But the actual best side character for me of course you can't see her, she's behind me, isn't she? There she is Tataru. Tataru was a delight, pretty much from word go, in FF14. She was always the human perspective character, right? Obviously, she's not quite that, and there's other things going on with her, and she's got her own side quest now, apparently, which I haven't done. But when I think of side character, this is what comes to mind. She's not a party member. She's not a main, she's not a main villain. She's not a central villain. She's not a main character. And they did a lot of really good stuff with her, and they never failed to use her properly, even in the early stuff, which, let's be honest, several of the characters are not utilized properly in the early stuff. And Tataru never stopped getting better, too. Even this scene I'm showing with you, which is actually after the Endwalker finale. This is a 6.1 cutscene, I do believe. Even this very scene here kind of was awesome, and was a great illustration to her and the type of character she is, and just how supportive she is, but she's still got nuance and depth to her because she's got her own things going on, and she's really good at the financial side of things, of course, but not just in a joking way, because she's been very used to having to manage this organization for so long and blah, 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 blah. Tataru is my favorite side character, which of course leads us immediately into the worst side character. Now, I'm just going to share this with you because this is funny. So, when we originally put up that worst side character, Kai Leng won. And I looked at that like, no, that's not cool. Because Kai Leng it doesn't work. He's not a side character. We just talked about this. And when I say Kai Leng won, I want you to understand this. The number 2 person had 8 votes. That's Skadge from Tor. Kai Leng had 72 votes. And when I say 72, I mean 72 first picks. It was such a landslide that I actually couldn't manually remove those votes and pick anything else, because most of the people who voted for Kai Leng didn't pick a number 2 or 3. They just picked Kai Leng and said done. So the voting system actually broke in this case. So most of you are aware of this, we had to set up an entirely separate poll just to solve this problem, which is called Worst Side Character, this time with no Kai Leng. Did Kai Leng get any 2 votes? Let's see here. Yes, actually. And 3s and 4s. And that's as far down as it went. So yeah, Kai Leng continues to warp time and space around him, as is his wont. Oh wait, no, I'm looking at the wrong data. Sorry, no. 12 people picked Kai Leng for their second vote, and that's it. Nobody went for third. So we redid the poll and just removed Kai Leng from it completely. And so we now have the worst side character, this time with no Kai Leng. So, at the bottom, we have the adventure line. I feel like this is a meme answer. Zote from Hollow Knight. Yeah, he's a dick. Screw him. Jorgen from Tor, who most of you probably don't remember. Now, this one surprised me. Maggie Robbins from The Dig got a solid 10 votes. That's impressive. A lot of people apparently didn't care for Maggie in The Dig. I'm just vaguely amused by that. But even she was beaten by Isun from Okami. And this almost feels like a meme answer, but Lise from Final Fantasy XIV, who probably doesn't qualify, but whatever, got the number 4 slot with quite a few votes, 15 votes for her. Then Skadge up at 25 votes, but of course we're going to get to the top 2. So number 2, we have Moneybags from Spyro. And I talked about this when we were going through Spyro, because Moneybags went from being like a joke character to being actually frustrating and what are you doing? Or sorry, I'm doing it the wrong way. He went from being a frustrated get off my screen character to an amusing character, and from 2 to 3. But he was actually pretty bad in 2. Like, holy crap. So I can see that. But the actual winner, and this is funny to me for several reasons, is... No, not him. The actual winner is Corso, the first smuggler companion from Tor. Now, this is one of those very rare cases where I kind of agree with you. Obviously, this wasn't my pick, but my point is, the thing that made Corso so terrible is specifically the fact that, as Takoda just pointed out, he was not intended to be a hate sing character. Corso was intended to be a beloved sidekick, someone who was supposed to be the character everybody loved, and he was Corso. Why is this loading screen taking so long? Yeah, he was the Neelix, exactly. He was someone who was intended and designed... Is this glitching? Oh, there we go. He was intended and designed to be, you know, the breakout character, the human character, the character everybody loved, the character everybody, like, adored. We haven't even gotten to him yet, holy crap. Okay, we're going to skip forward a little bit until he actually shows up, which should be right after this. Ironically, that character sucks too, but that's unrelated. But no, instead, he's Corso. He's a misogynistic pig who is stupid and, like, actively frustrating in what he does and how he does it. And he does it all for the wrong reasons. And he's trying to come across as this plucky rebellion kid. We still haven't even seen him. Holy crap. There he is! There's my boy! My boy! There's Corso. And yeah, Vet was the person who was actually universally loved. And instead, we got Grease Face. Look at his face! Look at his face. Whoops. Why is this being so weird? Oh, that's why. Okay, sorry. Look at his face for a second. Look at how greasy his face is. It's just... Oh my god. So this is Corso. And yeah, he's just... Okay, yeah. So... And it's I actually like the visuals of Tor, believe it or not. As I've mentioned several times, it kind of grew on me, and I kind of like how they work on it. But Corso is just... Anyways. Yeah, actual Grease Face could take lessons from Corso. But he wasn't actually my pick. Let's go over to my pick for worst. My pick was Justin, which I'm going to ignore that for a second, but thank you, Justin. So... let's see. Worst side character. Hans Clamp from Parasite Eve. Valens from Final Fantasy XIV. Skadge from Tor. Corso from Tor. The Doc from Tor. General Garza from Tor. Look. But then, of course, I was thinking, who's really a frustratingly aggravating side character? And it is, and remember my mentality going into this for side character, for worst side character. And the first character that actually came to my mind was the main character, the PC, during the Jaula arc in STO. Now, I decided there was actually one character who's worse than that. But really think about what I just said, because I'm not really joking. One of the biggest problems with the Jaula arc, and we'll actually talk about this later, is the fact that the main character is shunted off into being a side character in her story. But no, there is actually one worse side character. Brunmark is the worst side character of all the games we played. And you're probably thinking, well, I thought everything you just said about Corso. No, listen to me for a second. Because Brunmark is worse in several ways because of the fact that he is so boring and so one-note, and he's shoved into your party, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then you add on some frustrations on top of that. Like listening to his voice is kind of like listening to two penguins having sex in your ear while at the same time using a cheese grater on a tuba. Brunmark sucks. Everything about him sucks. And I just want him to leave my party and leave my screen immediately. Moving on. So up here, Walkers. What's next? Stream of the Year. Okay, so that's our last category for the first vote. Stream of the Year. Now, I was very curious to see your guys' votes on this one. Stream of the Year is exactly what it sounds like. What's the stream that you enjoyed the most? What's the best stream, regardless of the game that was being played? There are actually quite a few options that were listed here. Some of these I find very interesting. Star Trek Shattered Universe was on the list, which I could see why people would pick that. Obviously, there were several bad games on this list. Someone also picked Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, because bad grammar. And someone picked Devil May Cry 2, which, yeah, I could see that. I'm surprised Devil May Cry 2's was that far down, actually, because we really went into detail on DMC2. Above that was DMC5, little surprised by that one. Above that is Stardew Valley. Above that is Tor. And above that is Secret of the Stars. Stanley Parable got quite a few votes, and Mass Effect 3 got quite a few votes, which leaves the top two. On the number 2 slot, with looks like about 48 total votes, quite a few, is Mass Effect 1. I'm a little surprised by that, but at the same time, I could kind of see it. It was a decent stream. We did talk about a lot of things, which of course means we talked about Star Trek. And it was probably the only stream that didn't have any stumbling points. I had several people complain during both the Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 streams, so that makes sense. But all of those got curb stomped by the actual winner. Try to be surprised, but the actual winner is... I mean, what more can I possibly add to this, right? This is the perfect encapsulation and example of why I say it doesn't really matter how long a game is. Not really. Length of game is a variable, but it is a variable, not the variable. This game was, I say 53. Actually, I could double check my figures on that really quick. This was a very long stream. And yet, never really got old. I mean, that's not true. It got old early on, and there were some parts where it made me go absolutely bonkers. But by the time we actually started getting to some of the good stuff, all of that, oh god, let this end, went away. 54 days. It was a 54-day stream. 475.94 hours just spent streaming. Yeah, a lot of... we actually hit the 100 marker in VODs. I had to change how I sort things a little bit just to accommodate. And yeah, FF14's entire stream was just kind of a celebration of the community, as I already mentioned. And we had so many highs, and we talked about the lore, we talked about game design. I literally came up with a new MMO design concept during this stream, which I have carried forward, and I've actually been discussing with regards to other games. By the way, I swear to God Blizzard watched this stream, because they implemented the playground concept in Dragonflight. I'll show that off when we get there, but holy crap. Anyways, so this is a great stream, obviously, but let's go to my favorite streams, because obviously we had a few of these. So some of my favorite streams, we had Secret of the Stars, which I actually think was legitimately a very good stream. I'm actually really happy about the Secret of the Stars stream. Despite how terrible the game was, the stream was legit. Which, like I said, I actually mentioned this during the Secret of the Stars stream. The streams that tend to be the best and most enjoyable are the games that are really bad, or the games that are really good. And those tend to be the highlights, right? That tends to be a thing. So it doesn't surprise me that that was such an awesome stream. And I know this is going to sound... No, don't do that, Laura. Don't do that. Hang on, can I be real for once? I know this is very off topic. Something I've been struggling with over the past couple of weeks. Something that I've actually, the past 30 years. But the point is, something I've been trying to fix over these last few weeks is I have a voice in the back of my head, a filter. So we all have filters, right? You know, you go to say something, and I need to go down to Runner. You go to say something, and there's a filter that catches it before it comes out your mouth. And some of you in chat are going, what's a filter? But I have a filter. In fact, I have several filters, probably because I talk on camera so much. But one of those filters, it's this voice in the back of my head that if I ever say anything positive about myself, there's a filter that catches that and says, no, wrong, bad. Because of the way I was raised and because of the way I grew up and stuff I'm not going to bore you with. And that filter is something I've been trying to delete. It's actually been really hard to do because I grew up that way. I grew up... Again, I don't want to bore you with it. There's a reason I'm not very close to my mom and my dad anymore. So there's that filter is something I've been trying to get rid of, especially in these last few weeks. I'm trying to make like an actual concentrated effort to get rid of it. I'm still failing, obviously, because what I was about to say was I was really on point during the Secret of the Stars stream. I actually felt completely on the ball and managed to roll with it and keep it entertaining and keep it jokey the whole time. And that filter immediately jumped on it and said, no. And I had to stutter and say, well, what started coming out of my mouth was, I think I did an acceptably passable job or something like that. And then I caught myself. I was on point for that stream. God, that's hard to even say that. I was on point for that stream. It was a damn good stream. The other one I picked was the Stardew Valley stream, which is actually kind of a funny one because that was an extremely chill stream. But that's also a stream where I was kind of bringing my A game, especially whenever my sister was in chat, because she and I bounce off of each other wonderfully. We've always had great chemistry. That's why we adopted each other. And that was also a fantastic stream. But at the end of the day, there's only one game I think I could really fit as my stream of the year, which is, of course, Final Fantasy XIV. What do you want from me? What do you want from me? It was such a good stream. We, like from every angle, from the angle of just chatting and joking and lore running, actually really diving into the lore and the behind the scenes. I spent like 90 minutes the first day just explaining how bad 1.0 was. We were just smashing out of the park. It was probably one of the better lore runs I've done overall. Probably better than the WoW lore run, and that's impressive. Oh my god, I'm gonna be killed! Get that scythe away from me! There's also... we really... It's another thing I do. I tend to say we, so I don't take credit for something. I was on point with game design discussion. We had massive... interesting discussions about boss design philosophy, dungeon design philosophy, class design philosophy, the playground concept, which I mentioned earlier. There was a lot of absolutely fantastic discussions. And Blizzard totally stole my ideas. And this was a really, really good stream. So, not the last time I'm going to agree with you guys on terms of that. So, next thing we've got is we've got the worst antagonist of the year. Now, hang on. I know what you're thinking, but just try to be surprised. Let's go through our list here. So we've got Ad Avis from Quest for Glory. Yep. Nemeroth from Space Marine. Nobody voted for them. couple people voted for Xenos, Elohim from the Talos Principle. That's an interesting pick. Although this is antagonist, not villain. I said that. Lothar from Wolfenstein Youngblood. Oh god, what do we call him? The Obstructive Man? The Obtuse Man from Mass Effect 3. Vitiate from Tor. Jaula, of course, from Star Trek Online. Ranjit from FF14. The Catalyst from Mass Effect 3. Was it Obtuse? Either way, it was Tom. But I think you all are going to be extremely surprised to know that the winner of the worst antagonist of the year, by a freaking mile, by a massive sweep, is not Tom. It's the guy immediately after. It's that guy right there. That god-damned jackass. What's funny, and I know I've already said this, but I want to reiterate this because it's important. I often question my own thoughts and worry, and did I really think that? Maybe it wasn't as bad or good as I thought it was. And so when I go back through and really analyze the work, sometimes I think, yeah, we'll see how it is this time. And it's always fascinating when it turns out that they're not that bad, they're worse. Kai Leng is worse. Kai Leng, oh my god, is such a terrible character. In a similar manner to the aforementioned Starchild problem. He is a perfect encapsulation of everything wrong with Mass Effect 3, all the bad parts, all the diffs. And the fact that he's not even really a character, it's partially the same problem I had with Brunmark. But as Taqueta points out, being such a nothing burger is only one of the many problems with Kai Leng. He is so bad. But I'm going to go ahead and give my answers to this. I came up with a few worst antagonists. Chronica from Mortal Kombat 11, who was a complete generic I'm evil mwahaha character. Inquisitor Vitalis Benevent, that's the guy from Plague Tale, who was probably one of the worst aspects of that entire game. Tom, yeah, enough said. Kai Leng, enough said. The Catalyst, enough said. Tom Cruise, who is, of course, a complete nothing character, as we talked about in Secret of the Stars. There's a lot of nothing characters in worst antagonists here, I'm noticing. And then, of course, there's Ranjit, who can go directly to hell. I already mentioned Kai Leng. There's also Devil May Cry 2 dude. Now, I could have actually looked up his name, but be honest, if I said the name of the villain from Devil May Cry 2, would you recognize it? Generic corporate guy, not Argosax. So I remember Argosax. However, I actually had someone who, for me, was an even worse villain, even worse antagonist, than Kai Leng. And I really debated this, because it was between Kai Leng and this. But at the end of the day, there was an antagonist I hated even more than Kai Leng this year. And that is... Dramatic pause. Jaula, the sister of Takuvma. This piece of garbage. I double-checked. I went back and double-checked the notes. Not counting the arc. Just the character was individually responsible for 27 separate negatives. There are entire games that don't get 27 negatives. This twat, this piece of filth, tanked the STO score by herself. And if it's not obvious, I am actually angry about this. She is so bad that it's one of those I can't summarize it situations. You really do have to go and rewatch the run to understand just how bad this filthmonger is. Bad voice acting, bad characterization, bad arc, bad presentation, bad writing, bad focus, just bad. Screw this woman. Even Kai Leng does not come close to this. And I know, because I counted. But let's get to some positivity. Positivity. Let's talk about best antagonist, okay? So, let's go up to your vote. Best antagonist. What do we got? What do we got here? So, oh my god. Okay. So, at the very bottom, we have Xenos with 0 votes. I want to savor that for a second, that nobody voted for Xenos as best. Oh, that's so satisfying. That's so satisfying. Nobody voted for Xenos. Ah. All right. So, okay. That's I needed that. I needed that. We have 1 vote for Dusk Noir from Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, etc. The Master from Fallout 1. Valkorion from Tor. I get that. Valkorion, if I could talk just for a second about this. Valkorion is why presentation matters. So I'm going to spoil something, and I don't give a damn. Valkorion and Vitiate are actually the same character, same individual, but Valkorion was written differently, acted differently, and presented differently. Valkorion is why presentation matters when it comes to that. You got a great voice actor, who I suddenly can't think of his name. Help me out. He's a great actor. He does a lot of great stuff recently. I'm just going to wait for somebody to say it in chat. DePaul, thank you. Darren DePaul. Darren DePaul nails it. Of course he does. It's Darren DePaul. And they actually do some really great stuff with his motion and his capture and how they just so much better. So I get that. But moving on. We also have Alex from Prey. Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat 11. Yeah, he was actually really awesome in Mortal Kombat 11. One of the highlights of that whole game. Gristle from Psychonauts 2. Interesting pick. Darth Thanaton, another excellent villain from Tor. Kefka from Final Fantasy XIV, which I don't know. I think this is a meme one. Elidibus from Final Fantasy XIV. Virgil from Devil May Cry 3. Not actually sure I agree with that one, but I get it. Shodan from System Shock 1. I'm surprised that one got as many votes as it did. Oh, absolutely, Trihexia. And then we have the narrator from the Stanley Parable, and the Elusive Man specifically from Mass Effect 2. But then we've got the top 2. Now, this is an interesting one. This is one of the reasons why the preferred rank choice works the way it does, because if this was a first past the post, the number 2 slot would have won. But it's not, because first past the post is a terrible, terrible voting system, and always should be. So instead, the number 2 slot is Emmett Selk, who was first pick for a lot of people, but not second or third or anything else for a lot of people. Which, of course, leads us to the actual winner for Best Antagonist of the Year. And this one's kind of sliding in the line, but it counted, so... Now, I'll admit, this is one of those asterisk-y ones, because, I mean, is she really the main antagonist? But of course, as we already talked about, there's a bit of gradient when it comes to main antagonist and primary antagonist and then secondary antagonist and so forth and so on. So this is another reason why we're going to be spreading out the character categories next year. Because GLaDOS, I don't think actually qualifies as the antagonist of this game. But I don't want to get into that choice because she is definitely an antagonist of this game. And she is a party member, that's also true. And she is GLaDOS. Now, what's really funny about this one to me is that she is, in my opinion, better in every way in Portal 2 than in Portal 1. Which is funny, because for a very long time, I said that Portal 2 was just Portal 1, but better in every way. And after having reviewed both side by side, I stand by that firmly. So, GLaDOS, yeah, absolutely. Of course, this is your pick, not mine. So let's go down to my stuff here. I had a couple of people for Best Antagonists. We actually had some good antagonists this year. I already mentioned a couple of them. Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat 11. I actually also put Agnes from Devil May Cry 4. Nobody mentioned him, but I really liked Agnes from Devil May Cry 4. And Arkham from Devil May Cry 3. Go figure. I also mentioned Valkorion for the reasons we already mentioned. Wheatley is who I picked from Portal 2. I also put very, very high up there Elidibus, and of course Darth Barris and Darth Thanaton, both of whom I gushed about constantly during the Tor run. But you know who my pick was. At the end of the day, I actually had to specifically take a still shot for this because there was essentially no cutscene I could pull that wouldn't be spoilers for something. So we went with this. But I chose this cutscene for a very specific reason. Because this one cutscene, which happens reasonably far into the Shadowbringers campaign, I believe it's your fourth zone. As you're approaching the fourth zone, when you're going up north to Ilmak, or however you pronounce that, that's when this cutscene happens. So, fairly well in. And yet, in this one scene that I have frozen for this shot, he is more better done. English. He is better presented and more well developed in this one cutscene than every antagonist we had up to that, which includes Ranjit and Fatso, whose name I can't think of right now. He is personally getting involved, and it's a beautifully foreshadowed scene, and everything he says makes perfect sense in character, both before and after you know what's going on. Vothri, thank you. But the thing I love most about Emmett Selk, really, is that there are so many layers to his character. He is a villain. Let's be very clear about this. This man has been okay with genocide multiple times. But that doesn't make him, like... It's one of those wonderful things that we've talked about before. That just because a villain is made more nuanced or interesting or developed doesn't make them stop being a villain. We actually had a discussion about that during the Witcher 3 run. So he is a villain. He's definitely an antagonist. But he is a very fleshed out, nuanced, interesting, well-developed character who has a lot of layers to him and kept being relevant. He's arguably the main antagonist of all of FF14 in a way. In fact, I'm going to stick by that. He is the main antagonist of FF14 up to and through Endwalker, and has personal presence in 2 full expansions. My opinion on that. Yeah, just, I could keep going. I could keep gushing, but I think you get it. So next we get into protagonists. Now this one, again, we're probably going to go ahead and divvy this up into multiple categories, because... Well, let's talk about worst protagonists here. So, you all voted for a couple people. Mega Man Volnut from Mega Man Legends. No votes for that. The PC from Pokemon Snap. Why? Simon from Soma. Okay, I get that one. He was kind of a nothing burger. Like, he was not a good protagonist. Now, this one, I get that it's a meme, but I'm a little curious why multiple people voted for me being the worst protagonist in Stardew Valley. If you would like to explain yourselves, I would be curious to know why you voted for that. Then, of course, we have the Bard from Bard's Tale. Yeah, that makes sense. He was terrible. Dante, specifically from Devil May Cry 2. No, I don't nominate anything, Savicom. Nominations are not me. That's all on you. Yeah, exactly, Plutonia. Just frustrating. Anyway, so Dante from DMC2. Yeah, totally agree with that. Trooper, the Trooper from Tor, agree with that. Jaula from Star Trek Online. Shepard from Mass Effect 3. Now, what's interesting about that, and this is going to sound strange, having gone back through it, I actually agree that Shepard became worse of a character each game. Shepard, though, I know I'm going to get some hackles for this, was never really that good of a protagonist, in my opinion. They were at their best in 1, at least if you were female and had a proper voice actress, and they were okay in individual scenes in 2, but then we get to 3. And yeah, Shepard was officially pretty bad in 3. Shepard is a good vessel, but not a good protagonist. It's an interesting balancing point they picked, and I don't blame them for doing it. But moving on to the actual worst protagonist of 2022. Try to be surprised. It's Kai Leng! No, I'm joking. It's actually... How many of you even remember these two? Be honest. How many of you remember these two cringe artists, written by people who have never written for teenagers before, who have no idea how people act, who are trying desperately to make them relatable and understandable and human, and instead make them feel so alien. Because I don't like using the word cringe. The word cringe is overused in the internet. This, what we're about to see, and I'm going to make you watch this scene, because I had to watch this scene to edit it for this. This scene is cringe. These two terribly written, badly acted, badly motion captured morons. The scene you're seeing right now is actually the best scene they have, and it sucks. I just... Yeah, oh my god. Yeah, that's the other thing. They're written to be basically 10-year-olds. They're not. They're older than that. And it shows. It shows. Yeah, this is the first kill scene. This is music from the game, yes. Wolfenstein Youngblood actually has a pretty decent soundtrack. So they're sneaking up on this dude. And they're like, oh god, what do I do? And so like, oh god, okay, we gotta kill this guy. And the guy's like, oh no. And then he's like, oh, I'm gonna kill you. And then his head explodes. And her mouth is open when it happens. And then she's like, yeah. And then she throws up. Because the best way to endear yourself to a character is have them throw up on camera. Then she cheers again. And I'm just reciting what's happening on the screen at this point. These two suck. This is a very, very common problem in all of fiction, is that most writers legitimately do not know how to write younger people. And I don't just mean with the, how do you do, fellow kid, in a joking way. I mean, literally, most people don't know how to write children, or teenagers, or young adults. So, word of advice from a writer who understands his own flaws. If you can't write something, don't. Worst protagonist from me. I came up with several answers here. We had the twins that I just talked about. The main character from Secret of the Stars, who is a very nothing burger character. The Bard, who was trying really, really hard to be funny and failing at it. The Jedi Knight from Tor. Don't feel like I need to explain that one. And the Trooper from Tor. Don't feel like I need to explain that one. I also mentioned Sulu. And I mentioned that kind of as a bonus points thing, because Sulu's an awesome character. He was even awesome back in TOS. And, you know, George Takei is great. But the fact that they ruined Sulu so hard in Star Trek Shattered Universe is just part of why that's so frustrating. That they would take a good actor, because it was George Takei, and a good character, and just smeared him. God damn it. Yeah, exactly, Josie's Mask. But at the end of the day, I know this is going to be very shocking to you when I list my actual worst protagonist of the year. Now, this is a spoiler, but I don't care. For those of you not aware, Ja'ula becomes the main protagonist of STO for the rest of her arc, after you start fighting her as the main antagonist. And when I say main protagonist, and I showed this scene on purpose, it's going to be partially hidden by me, but notice what the camera's doing. It's panning back to her, because we are literally playing as her now. Literally. We are actually playing as Ja'ula. That's how much she supplants the main character, you. I already ranted about Ja'ula earlier, but one of the reasons that she is 27 separate negatives just for her is because she starts off as a terrible antagonist, and then she becomes the terrible protagonist, and the whole story becomes about and revolves around her. And like I said, you literally play as her. Not the whole thing, but you do play as her for several missions. Moving on. let's get some positivity in here. Best protagonist. Okay. So we actually had a lot of really good protags over the last year, like quite a few. In fact, I know this because there's actually, for once, a decent spread on the votes. So at the very bottom, we have the partner from Pokemon Explorer of Sky. Tyr from Suikoden 1, had to look up who that was because I'm stupid. V from Devil May Cry 5. Kratos from God of War 3. Nero from Devil May Cry 5. Amicia from Plague Tale. I have an itch on my nose. Rasputin from Psychonauts 2. Jill from Valhalla. And by this point, like, we're already at the point where quite a few people are voting for these. So we're not in the minimums. We're already up here, right? Because we got Snake from Metal Gear Solid. Alphino from FF14. Dante from Devil May Cry 3. It was pretty close. It was pretty close between two characters towards the top. The number 2 slot, very, very shortly behind the number 1 slot, is Zagreus from Hades, which actually kind of surprised me. Again, Hades wasn't my thing, but I'm a little bit surprised that Zagreus ended up being that high on the list for so many people. In fact, if we were doing the first past the toast system, which is what we're going to call that now, then Zagreus would have won. But no, instead he didn't win because that system is stupid. The actual winner this one caught me a little bit by surprise, but I kind of get where you're coming from this. This is the Sith Warrior. Now, I figured Agent would actually be the one in the ring. I noticed Agent wasn't even mentioned. Go figure. But no, the Sith Warrior, who's that guy right there, Darth I Am Evil Mwahaha, I believe was the character name, is actually probably one of the better fleshed out characters amongst the Tor main characters. They actually have personality and vibe and perspective and arc even, depending on how you play them. In fact, they have 2. And the Warrior, yeah, no, I'm kind of completely with it. It's actually interesting how much effort and work was put into specifically making the Sith Warrior a character. Agent was probably better written overall, but I do kind of think the Warrior is the more interesting individual. And again, there's 2 different takes on the Warrior, and there's some bleed over between those 2. I mean, I would recommend it, Rex. Although maybe not in the other direction. So, sorry there's so many shots of Barris here. You'd be surprised how hard it is to get a shot of the frickin' Sith Warrior. So, this is as good as we got. So you're just going to see a bunch of Barris here. What do you want from me? Anyways. But my best protagonist, well, we had a few. We had V, of course, the Agent, the Sith Warrior. Estinian, Graha Tia, Urianger, Alize, Alphino. Dohalim, that's one. How many of you even know who that is? Because Dohalim was actually probably the best character in that game for me. There's also Raiden. No, not that one. Kratos, the partner from PMD. Jill from, Valhalla. And Bowser from Super Mario RPG. A little surprised nobody picked him, but Bowser was probably the best character in terms of characters from Super Mario RPG. It also began my love affair of Bowser as a character, which most of the RPGs have carried forward, so that's awesome. Correct, Canada Bangs. Yes, Dohalim was a character in Tales of Arise, and he is an awesome character. But all of them pale compared to the one true best protagonist ever, which is Garrus. Because Garrus isn't a side character, he's a protagonist. I don't feel the need to really add much here. I like Garrus a lot. And he's awesome. He's awesome in Mass Effect 2. He's awesome in Mass Effect 3. He deserves the happiness with Tali at the end. He's great. I'm just going to stop with that because I really, really don't know what else to add to this. Also, I wish he was into, because I would totally marry this man. All right, so there is no Shepard without Vicarian. But moving on. So let's get back into negativity. The toxicity must return. So now we're going to talk about the worst visual design. There weren't a lot of entries for this, which I found funny, because we covered a lot of games with terrible visual design over the last year. My list is I had to pare it down because of how many I was running into. But we have Devil May Cry 3. I'm not sure why that's on the list, but it got 0 votes, so take that what it is. Psychonauts 1, which I understand. The Dig. Little surprised by the dig having worst visual design. I thought it was decent sprite work, especially for the era, but whatever, I suppose. Franbo, nothing else is ever going to be said about that game. Fallout 1, which I agree with completely. I think Fallout 1 looks terrible. Star Trek Shattered Universe. That one's a weird one, because while it doesn't have good visual design, I think most people are specifically picking Shattered Universe because of the wormhole level, which I do not have footage of, because the wormhole level is one of those you're going to get nauseous just looking at it levels. If you remember, I had to play that level, and that sucked. But anyways, the top two in the number 2 slot. Now, I'm actually very surprised by this. Number 2, Devil May Cry 2. I figured that one would be the winner. It's way in the lead over number 3 slot. Devil May Cry 2, yeah. I mean, big, giant, empty areas. Have you seen the thumbnail I used for the Devil May Cry 2 VODs? Because it's a shot of Dante just standing there in an empty street in an empty city. And that is Devil May Cry 2 in one picture. God, I hate that game so much. But no, the actual winner, and I know this is going to probably shock you a little bit. Secret of the Stars looks like crap, even for a SNES game. In fact, as I think I pointed out during the run, Secret of the Stars looks like crap for a NES game. Moving on. So let's go down to my personal worst visual design. So, as I mentioned, I had to pare this down a little bit. We had Franbo. Beyond Good and Evil, I really didn't like what they did with the visuals on that. But then again, early PS2 games literally give me headaches because of how blurry and block they are. So, call that what it is. Psychonauts 1, same general problem. Now, hang on. Parasite Eve. Go ahead, get out your pitchforks. Let's get this over with. I also didn't like how tiny and big looked. But Parasite Eve, to me, actually looks pretty bad. And if I could explain that a little bit. I tend to not like the early 3D stuff in any system, computer, PS1, or N64. In my opinion, most of those early games visually look bad to me. And I can even explain this. We spent time from the early 80s to the late 90s developing sprite work, right? And by the late SNES era, we had really, really good sprite work. And then, so like if you were to follow the visual quality, it went like this. And then the PS1 and the N64 came out. And of course, it's a brand new tech with brand new hardware, with brand new everything. And so everything just went down here. So I went directly from games like, Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana and Seiken Densetsu 3 and Final Fantasy 6 and Mega Man X3, which has very good sprite work, just down to things like Parasite Eve, or, the original Spyro game, or even Mario 64. And it's just, what am I looking at? So Parasite Eve is just, but it's okay. If you hated me for that, one of the other games I mentioned for worst visual design was Elden Ring. Go ahead. If you remember, we had a argument over that, and I did end up giving Elden Ring a positive to general brickwork, and I wrote in the thing, I forget the exact wording, but I wrote in the thing, I gave this a plus because the chat argued for it. And I was like, okay, after arguing it back and forth for quite a while, I just said, here's a plus for graphics. That's all you're getting out of me. That's it. That's the compromise. Moving on, because I think that game looks ugly as sin. It's got, I talked about it during the stream. It's got that really like you can almost feel the sweat and the residue and the filth. And I'm not even talking about like the gross areas. Everything has that aesthetic to it. It's all got that weird texturing and that weird glistening effect to it. And the whole game, desiccated, thank you. I knew we came up with a word when we were streaming. The whole game looks desiccated, and the whole game makes me feel like it's filthy. And I just did not like that visual design. Did I mention it was Beyond Evil? Oh yeah, Devil May Cry 2, of course. I was really thinking about Devil May Cry 2 because Devil May Cry 2 has terrible visual design. But at the end of the day, there's only one game that has the worst visual design that I have ever covered. For those of you who weren't here for this stream, by the way, please go watch this stream. Or watch the highlight reel. It's coming live next Friday. This game was so bad, just visually, that I did something I never do. So, some of you know this about me. Let's talk about this, because I got 10 minutes of footage here. Some of you... some of you know this about me, but some of you may not. I'm more of a surface-level reviewer, really. You know, I will cover something, and I'll give pluses, and I'll give minuses. But I'm like 1 or 2 steps down in terms of really tunneling into something. Some people out there will do an entire stream or an entire video, a 15-minute video on a song, or on a level, or on a character, or on a scene, or whatever, right? It's rare that I actually really tunnel down as far as I can, and I can. And I did here. I spent close to 30 minutes tunneling all the way down and really discussing the visuals of this game. And I just went full tilt onto it. This game, visually, is terrible on so many levels. The screen that's actually playing right now isn't like one of the worst. Here, let's skip forward a little bit, because I think I have... Oh, looks like I don't have it in this particular clip. But I mean, just pause. Look at that screen for just a second. Look at that tile design. Everything about this game is... and we kept focusing on the grass. Again, really zooming in. Let's look at how many different games design grass. All of that's in the highlight reel, by the way. This is the worst visual design game that I've ever covered. Probably not the worst I've ever played, because I played Hoshi no Dijibijibija, but this... oof. But you know what? There was a lot of really good visual design games we covered, too, weren't there? There were some really good ones. Hang on, let's see. So what did you guys come up with for best visual design? Oh, wow. Okay, so at the very bottom we have Code Vein. Now, despite the fact that that only got 1 vote, I'm actually with that. Code Vein actually has a pretty good visual design. Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, which actually I'm completely with that. The neon look and the it looks 80s. It looks 80s, right? Blood Dragon literally just looks like the 80s in video game format. Gree, which was very, very stylized, obviously. Valiant Hearts, same thing. Cyber Shadow, fantastic sprite work. Valhalla, very stylized. Plague Tale Innocence, very well done showcasing of multiple biomes, too. It wasn't just all grime and rats. Psychonauts 2, which, with one exception, was very well done and very, very visually. Hollow Knight, which was very high up on the list. Obviously, we're in the number 4 slot now. And then we go up even further to Return of the Obra Dinn, which I was really worried. No guesses, Tara. I was really worried that Return of the Obra Dinn would be headache-inducing or bad-looking when I first looked at it, because I'd only ever seen screenshots of it. But when I actually sat down and played it, a lot of work was done making that look good. It was really impressive. And I think I talked about that during the stream. Now, this is funny. So this is best visual design. So in the number 2 slot is Elden Ring. Moving on. I have nothing new to add to that. But even that was surpassed by the number 1 game. Where are we at? Best visual, which is 26. Which is... whoop! Yep. No, not that. I thought about this for a bit. But I agree with it. Portal 1... we've talked about it before. Portal 1 wasn't really all that visually varied. It was distinct, but really there were 2 biomes and one of them was borrowed. But Portal 2... I know biome isn't quite the right term, but you know what I mean. Portal 2 actually has quite a few different biomes in terms of visual design, and each of them is substantially distinct. Tile set's a good word, thank you. Each of them is very distinct from each other, but it's not just the distinction. Think about how hard this is to do for a second. Imagine designing a tile set and making it good and making it visually distinct and making it colorful and working for it, and it has to work visually, and that is to say story-wise, and it has to work gameplay-wise. Then imagine doing that for multiple different biomes, each of which has to look different from each other, each of which has to get across a different thing. So you have all of the hard work of designing the one great tile set, and then you multiply that by making it so that each new tile set you make has to be distinct and different from each of them. Portal 2's tile sets are very well done. And yes, I said this during the run, and I'll say this again here. If you've never played through Portal 2 with the dev commentary, please do. It is very interesting and very worthwhile, even if you have no interest in game design. If you are interested in game design, watch it or play it. I'm not joking, because they are... There's a reason Valve was considered the masterclass of game design for so long. Seriously, it's one of the reasons so many of us are so goddamn pissed that they stopped making games. But I suppose I should talk about my favorite visual design. This is going to be an interesting one. So we're going to go back down to me here. Because actually there were a lot of visually distinct games this year. So obviously Tor, which as I mentioned, I actually do like the visuals of. Hades, which even though I had issues with Hades, come on, the game looks gorgeous. Hollow Knight, yeah. Another game I beat without cheats, by the way. All bosses with one exception. Or with like the last exception. God of War 2, specifically 2. 3 had a couple of issues visually, but 2 had some really good stuff for it and looked very visually distinct, and I loved it. I know at least one person's going to be happy about this one. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky had really good sprite work. And you know me, I value good sprite work, I value good brickwork, and it's one of the better looking Pokemon games of the 2D, of the sprite work era, so absolutely really great stuff. Cyber Shadow, I showed that off earlier, fantastic visual design. Gree, very stylized, of course. Return of the Obra Dinn, already gushed about that one. Sunless Sea, this one may surprise some people, but despite the fact that I didn't actually enjoy Sunless Sea personally, it was a very well done visually game. The aesthetic of the sea, of the Undersea, was very well presented. Just roaming, yeah, and I was actually just about to say, the sun. As we get closer to that, and you just hear the giant clockwork, and it just gets more and more blinding as we're getting close to it. It's a very visually distinct game. And of course, then there's Portal 2. Now you're like, well, hold on, Laura, that means you didn't pick Portal 2 for your favorite. I was very torn on this one. Because Portal 2, as I just gushed about, has absolutely amazing visual design. But honestly, I think there's one other game that beats it for me, and this is probably going to surprise a few people. Now, we had this discussion during the FF14 run. Because as I was going through it, one of the things that someone mentioned was, well, this looks weird compared to WoW. And I was like, well, yeah. And then someone in chat, and I forget whom, forgive me, said, well, WoW is very stylized, and FF14 is not. And I was like, well, no, that's not true. FF14 does not have realistic graphics. It is very stylized. It is the FF style that both FF12 and FF10 kind of started, and then FF12 kind of kept going, and so forth and so on. Which part of FF14? Everything I'm showing right now. But between the armor and the individuals and the brickwork, especially as the game finally started being able to actually showcase things properly when they were no longer shackled to the PS3, yeah, it's the Square Enix 3D anime style. It's a aesthetic. It's its own thing, and I actually do like it. I always have, with some asterisks to it, because individual games have done this good, bad, or in between. And yeah, if we do end up reviewing WoW this year, let's be clear, WoW is going to sweep a lot of these categories. Sorry. But the last thing I wanted to mention is I love the visual... of course, Rax gets it first. I love the fact that FF14 has unique but distinct universal markers for dungeon and boss design. And that is part of visual design. It is part of something because you need to make it so that it pops in the middle of all the other noise that's going on. So you can tell what to do and where to do it and how to do it. And I think it's awesome, and I think it's a great looking game, especially the shot I got right here. I kept getting photobombed by people as I was standing here getting this footage. So, you know. And yeah, they've recently backported even more of those, and they started doing that when we were streaming it. But that's just me. So, now we get into sound design. This should be a fun one. So most people don't even notice sound design. Not that that's a dig, it's just that's how it is. So we had very few nominations for worst sound design for you all. There was Grounded, which I don't know what the hell you're on about with that, because I think Grounded is contested for the best sound design of the year. Mega Man Legends, which was a constant problem. The Bard's Tale. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm kind of with that. The audio balancing in the Bard's Tale was terrible. And of course, Final Fantasy XIV, specifically ARR. And the winner is Kai Leng! No, oh, that's true. There was a lot of dialogue spam in Grounded. I'll actually give you that. But this is all the bad stuff. So naturally, there's only really one possible winner for the worst sound design. Too loud, too repetitive, terribly balanced. No, I understand, Rax. This game gave me a headache. Like, and I don't mean that in the facetious, the ha ha ha, it sucked way. I mean that in the, this game made, there's a reason I have ibuprofen sitting on my desk now. Still. On my end, now I notice sound design a lot more than most people do. That's not bragging. You don't have to do that, Lore. It's not bragging. I do notice sound design more because I've worked with sound design. And and that's true with everything, right? When you've worked with something, you tend to notice it more. You tend to be more aware of specific things. So yeah, I have actually done sound design work, and I continue to. I do it for the rewrites as well. And so I tend to notice when a game really stumbles on sound design. So there were a couple ones that really came up for me. Now, this is going to sound strange, but Mass Effect 1 was one that I actually noticed had pretty bad sound design because, first of all, there was a really bad balancing problem. Like a really bad balancing problem in Mass Effect 1. Some things were way too hot, too loud, and some things were way too quiet. And that's ignoring the fact that a lot of the sound effects were just... and then there's the dialogue spam, and just, it wasn't great. There's also Nefarious. Most of you probably don't even remember that game. But that was a game that also had some very serious audio spam problems. There's The Bard's Tale, which we already talked about. The Bard's Tale had really, really loud, like so loud I had to turn the game down more than default stuff. And then the rest of it was super, super quiet. And it's a really... Audio balancing is a really common problem, believe it or not, in game design. And I'm not going to talk about the damn songs, the repeating songs, but that's music, not sound design. Devil May Cry 1. Now, that one might hackle some people, but I want you to think about what Devil May Cry 1 sounded like for just a second. Ignore the music. Just the noise. And the people trying to talk under... And the footsteps. Oh my god, don't even get me started with footsteps. And then, of course, System Shock 1. Another game I had to lower the volume on because the sound effect from the computers and the robots... Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, we were there. Was so bad. And so, like, it was... They actually had audio that was peaking. And that's ignoring the fact that the audio logs were done by wildly different qualities in terms of mic and actor. So it was just bad across the board. But, okay, you know what I'm about to do. The actual worst sound design of the year. Nothing compares to DMC2. I mean, this is obviously a problem. But DMC2 just is a masterclass in how not to do sound design. Moving on. Best sound design. Okay, so let me scooch down here. All right. So, you guys, one of you voted for Star Trek Shattered Universe, and by which I mean none of you voted for it, but somebody nominated it. Feel free to explain yourself. We also have Head On Blood Right. I'm going to be honest, I don't even remember the sound design in that game. Gree, which is more of a music thing. There wasn't much sound design in that. I have a feeling a lot of people confuse sound design with music, because there's a couple in here that I'm just kind of like the Talos principle for sound design. Really? There's also Sunless Sea. No, I agree with that. Sunless Sea had great sound design, very atmospheric, and had some wonder. It added to the whole horrifying giant sea of unmitigated death thing they had going on. Speaking of which, Plague Tale Innocence, another game that had very good sound design. Those. Oh, yeah. I hope you don't like or don't mind the sound of rats. Ahem. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, which I agree with as well. And by 3, I mean R, sorry, the remake, which also had very good sound design, some really good gun design specifically. Spyro 3, not all that surprised by that one, little recent. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, yeah, okay. I kind of get that. I kind of with that. We also have Prey 2017. Now this one makes sense. I'm surprised this one is this far down on the list because in Prey, the audio design was part of the gameplay. Being able to tell where certain enemies were coming from or which enemies were or whatever was actually part of the game design. So that it being that far down at number 4 surprises me a little bit. We also have Outer Wilds. Yeah, I agree with that. Outer Wilds was wonderfully horrifying and, of course, used sound design, again, as a gameplay element in several respects. And the number 2 slot, this one surprises me a little bit, Metal Gear Solid 1. I think that's mostly because a lot of the sound effects from Metal Gear Solid 1 are iconic, rather than it actually having good sound design. But quite a few people voted for that, but all of them got absolutely curb-stomped by the best sound design, which is... I'm staying quiet here so you can listen to it. The footage and the audio have nothing to do with each other, because obviously I can't get audio design from my playthrough because you're just going to hear me yammering over it. But I got a nice section of someone playing with a no commentary, and just listen to it for a second. I bet several of you can not only name where this audio is playing from, but could be able to navigate the game a little bit based on the audio. And yeah, what can I say? Masterclass in sound design. Of course it is. It's Valve. Hell, yeah, even the hum of the machinery, the way the echoes... Some of you may not have even noticed that. Some of the echoes keep reverberating for a really long time when you're down in the underground to indicate just how vast the area is. It doesn't do that in the more enclosed spaces, but when you're out and about, it just echoes and echoes and very, very, very quietly in the background for several seconds. So much wonderful stuff there. Anyways, so coming to me for best sound design. Now, here we go. There's actually several games that had really good sound design, but I decided to narrow my list down a little bit. So, first of all, Plague Tale Innocence. I already mentioned it, but ignoring the obvious rats design, there was actually a lot done to make sound part of the stealth gameplay. Which, you know me, it's not just good sound design, but sound design that actually informs gameplay is something I really enjoy. However, I do also have to give special credit to both Space Marine and Titanfall 2. And you're probably thinking, why? Well, one aspect of good sound design is viscerality, something I talk about constantly. And both of those games had it in spades. So I don't really have much else to add to that. But rather than keep talking about other games, because I'm just going to be repeating myself for all the stuff you guys just voted for, why don't I just go ahead and mention my personal favorite best sound design of the year. And I'm a little amused by this, because it wasn't even on the list for you guys. Now, there were some audio spam problems. We already talked about that. Hell, I played this game 2 days ago. Because we're still doing our co-op playthrough. But the sound design in this game is bonkers good. Obviously, there's the basic directional stuff. There's atmospheric stuff, which changes a little bit based on which area you're in. But the reason I really, really praise it, the reason I push it so much further ahead, is that if you played this game, not being able to see for whatever reason, like it was total night, you can still hear and tell what's around you just based on the sound design. And now think about that for a moment. They had to actually sit down and come up with unique sounding sound effects for every different creature in the game. That is not a small task. So, and that's in addition to the obvious thing, like the atmosphere and just the interaction stuff and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, and then you hear a wolf spider. And trust me, they have a very distinct sound. Grounded just nailed it so hard. But anyways, music. Hey, I like music. Do you like music? You don't like music? No. Okay, so for worst music, there was very few suggestions for this one. This actually amuses me. So we had Mass Effect 1 for worst music of the year. What's really weird is 4 separate people voted for that. The Dig, which I'm going to be honest, I don't even remember the music from. Psychonauts 1, 10 people voted for that one. Quest for Glory 3, specifically, the first one that had the soundtrack. System Shock 1 Enhanced, we'll talk about that later. And Romance of the Three Kingdoms 14, which I'm going to go ahead and admit, I do not actually remember the music from. But it got a lot of votes. Tons of votes. But not as many votes as the actual winner. Don't worry, I muted this part. Now, I want to really make this point here, because there's only really the songs in The Bard's Tale, the songs that are actually vocaled. And the reason that's important is because the rest of the game... There we go. The rest of the game is like this. This is what the game actually sounds like. There's no music. And the game has huge swaths of gameplay with no music playing. I'm not even going to talk about the sound design balancing problem in this game. Dealy-dealy-ding! Yeah, not what I would call a surprise. Why would you do no music in a game called The Bard's Tale, for God's sakes? Anyways. My side of things. Oh, I forgot to switch. Sorry, that was you. Now back to me. Worst music. Oh, there were so many. There's obviously Devil May Cry 2, which is so bad that even though I did accordance for 1, 3, 4, and 5, I skipped 2 because none of the songs, and I mean this, none of the songs were music that I could turn into a song worth listening to. And I tried. I tried to do a decent mix in Devil May Cry 2, and I friggity failed at it. Also, in the worst music, this is kind of an asterisk, but Tor and Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Now, the reason for both is identical. They just use a lot of Star Wars music. Just songs from the movies. Now, that can and has worked in some games. Rebellion is one that comes to mind immediately. But not a lot of thought was put into the how and the why. The example I will never stop using is there's a musical sting that plays when Qui-Gon Jinn is stabbed to death. Spoilers in episode 1, okay? Try to picture it in your head real quick. Da, na, 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 na. Right? Like you can kind of picture it in your head or hear it in your head. That plays whenever an Imperial character takes off in a ship. Now, either thought was put into that and they're morons, or no thought was put into it. And based on having listened to most of Tor, I'm pretty sure they just copied and pasted a lot of Star Wars music without actually thinking about where to play it or how to play it. So there's just a bunch of like random smattered music from Star Wars in Tor and in Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I also mentioned The Bard's Tale because no music. I also mentioned Secret of the Stars for reasons I feel like I don't have to elaborate on. I also mentioned Elden Ring. Now, I actually meant to mention Elden Ring earlier because it's kind of not nearly as bad as the other examples I just mentioned. But all I'm going to say about Elden Ring is that one high-pitched note. And if you've played Elden Ring, you know what I'm talking about. If you remember, I was asked to mute that song specifically because it was causing so many issues for so many viewers who were watching. And I'm like, yeah, okay, we're going to go ahead and mute that because that was causing problems. And then there's so much to do in Limgrave, right? Well, we didn't play Resident Evil 4 last year, Zach, though. I also mentioned Prey because no music. I know, but I'm just mentioning that briefly. But let's go ahead and move on to the actual worst music of the year. Now hold on.
Conversion cancelled. Standard station restoration procedures online.
Here's the thing. This one has a really big asterisk attached to it. So for those of you who know, you know. For those of you who don't, the game was designed to be used by certain audio cards, which don't even exist anymore, in order to play essentially dynamic music. Certain specific events or statuses as you're playing through the game would change the song dynamically as you're going through it. So if you've played this game originally back in the day, you haven't heard this nonsense. But we didn't. And so that's why I say, even though there's an asterisk here, this really is still the worst music, possibly in gaming. Like, I don't want to put it in the absolute #1 slot, but the result of the game that we played last year was this nonsense. And there's actually worse than the song that's playing right now. It was just the most convenient clip I could find to really showcase the idea. Yeah. So that's why I said there's an asterisk there. It doesn't quite deserve that slot. But at the same time, it is the worst music, so what do you want from me? Best music. As the saying goes, no matter why it sucks, it still sucks. So a lot of votes for best music. A lot of spread here. We've got The Dig. We've got Okami HD, Cyber Shadow, Gree, Return of the Obra Dinn, Spyro 3, Lufia 2, Hollow Knight, Valhalla, God of War 2. All of those only had 5 votes or under, but they're just huge spread there. Then we have, of course, Super Mario RPG, which, I mean, Yoko Shimomura, right? Early on in her career, but still, holy crap. We've also got Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. Little surprised that that's that high on the list, but there it is. Hades. Little surprised that one wasn't higher on the list. Now, this one I don't understand, so I would like people to explain this to me. Because the #2 winner, in the #2 slot with quite a few votes, is Mass Effect 3 for best music. I can think of a couple of decent songs from Mass Effect 3. I even did accordance on one of them. But best music of the year? Alongside such giants like Hades, or Super Mario RPG, or God of War 2, or Lufia 2, or Cyber Shadow? I'm bonkered by that. I do not understand that. I actually agree with that, Spartan. I think Mass Effect 1 had the best soundtrack of the 3. But I guess that's true, Blue of Alex, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about music direction. We're talking about the best music. I don't know. Whatever. Either way, it didn't win. Because the actual winner is... I mean, of course it is. Of course it is. This game has, what, 570 tracks to it? Of course Soken, who is amazing, who has put out some absolute bangers over the years, including the song I'm listening to right now, wins this one. Now, there are songs I absolutely despise from this soundtrack, including the song I don't remember the name of, but it's the one that plays too damned often, especially in ARR. Dun, 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 dun. You know the one. You know the one. It was so bad I gave it multiple negatives because it was a bad song, badly used, and overused. Some of the, most of the ARR music is also not a thing I'm in favor of. And of course, you know, there's several other songs that I just really didn't get into. And some of the vocal tracks just obviously are not my thing. But I at least understand why so many people would pick this, because if we're looking at the bulk of the soundtrack, percentage-wise, I'm pretty sure most of it's a banger, right? Yeah, that's very, very true in everything, Gwenlock, which is really frustrating. But moving on. Moving on. I suppose I should give you my best music while we're here. Yeah, I guess, sure, whatever. So, best music. Well, I've got a bunch. I've got Super Mario RPG, which I don't need to explain. I've got Cadence of Hyrule. A little disappointed that wasn't even on the list. It's a game about music. I think most people didn't actually watch that stream. Devil May Cry 5, which I don't think I need to explain. Mass Effect 1, the best soundtrack of the Mass Effects. Lufia 2, which contains my favorite song of all time. Parasite Eve. What? It's a good soundtrack. Also Yoko Shimomura, by the way. That's weird when I think about it. And I also have to mention Final Fantasy XIV, which did not win for me. And I want to explain this a little bit, because this is going to sound really, really stupid and dumb. But what really... No, actually, Jesse's Mask. What really pushes this other game above FF14 for me is, first of all, this other game has no songs that I don't like, whereas FF14 has several I don't like. And the other problem is, this song, I immediately went out and bought the soundtrack for this game as soon as I saw it, or as soon as I heard it. And some of the songs on it have actually become part of my meditation cycle. Because the song I'm about to play, I'm pretty sure I picked the right song, is literally the song I use to clear my head and focus. Yep, that's it. Now, this game has a lot of bangers. Yes, this is the factory. Very good, Dakota. This game's soundtrack is so damn good. But that little extra oomph of not just being a great soundtrack, but also being music that fits into the program brain that I have. The math brain is what kind of pushes it that one little extra tidbit for me. I'm just going to let this play for a second. Also, look at that sprite work. Look at it. Look at that beautiful brickwork. God, this looks so damn good. Oh, I love this. I'm just going to plug this game again. Go. If you like punishing platformers, it's not really a punishing platformer. If you like Ninja Gaiden style platformers, go buy this game and play it. This game is unabashedly hard, sometimes fairly, sometimes not. And it is a slapper. This game is so good, especially given how small the development team was. Holy crap. Anyways. So now we're getting into the big boys. We're almost at the end here. We've gotten through all the side categories. Let's go ahead and get into gameplay. Now, you know me, I tend to differentiate gameplay from story rather definitively, and a lot of that has to do with presentation and specifics and blah, 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 blah. But it's time to go ahead and talk about the worst gameplay of 2022. You guys came up with several games. My personal favorite one on the list is Elden Ring, with 1 vote. The Dig, which was very far down there. I kind of agree with that, actually. While The Dig did several things right and was a decent point-and-click adventure game, it still had most of the problems of a point-and-click adventure game. So, Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I don't quite agree with that, but I want to say that I get why people would put FF14 on the list for worst gameplay. Because FF14 does have some good gameplay, but honestly, it's really localized. And let's be clear, the story is where it's at. I mean, boss design, yeah. Class design, absolutely. But that's kind of it on the gameplay axis for FF14. It's not like, to contrast this, and I've talked about this before, when we cover WoW, WoW is going to stomp on terms of gameplay. It's going to absolutely crush everything in terms of gameplay, because that's their focus. When they actually design quests to be fun and interesting and engaging, individual quests, just side quests, you understand why WoW is going to absolutely crush it on the gameplay axis. But that's what they focused on. That's what they wanted to do. Story-wise, anyways, but I understand why people would put FF14 as worst gameplay. Then we have Fallout 1. Yeah, no, that makes sense. A lot of old CRPGs have basically the same problems. I myself had a lot of trouble getting through Fallout 1, so... Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Yeah, I wanted to like that game. I was actually excited about that game. And then it was Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Wolfenstein Youngblood, which for a while there was one of our worst games ever. We have since gone past that, but... Yeah, oh yeah, by the way, sorry, I need to rewind for a second. Star Wars Bounty Hunter is a unique distinction. There's only 3 games that I've ever reviewed that I had to cheat, not because it was taking too long and not because it was too hard, but because playing it was causing me physical pain. And so we pulled up a frickin' YouTube video and watched someone playing through the game. That's Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Anyways, so Wolfenstein Youngblood, which is just garbage. It's a garbage game. Mummy Demastered. For those of you who weren't there for that, I was actually really excited for Mummy Demastered. And it's because I'm a moron. Because I thought I'd seen it sped run. And I was like, oh, that looks like a fun game. And I liked the concept. And the developers were a team that I enjoy. You know, I like the devs for the most part. So I was like, hey, this will be cool. But the critical mistake I made is I forgot that Mummy Demastered was being played during, for those of you familiar with it, the Awful Block. And for those of you not familiar with it, it's called the Awful Block. Anyways, moving past that, we then have the Old Republic. I like Tor. It's a sushi game. But Tor's gameplay sucks. It sucks balls. Oh my god. That game is a game you endure for the story, let me tell you. Whew. We were talking about FF14 having bad quest design. FF14 quest design has nothing on Tor's quest design. And I wasn't even going to get into the really bad planets like Corellia. I'm not joking when I say that every time we would approach Corellia again, you know, because we played Corellia 8 times. I can count. 8 times we played through Corellia. Each time we got to it, there was this part of me that just mentally clenched, right? Like I just felt, and I was just bracing for it. Like, all right, let's go through Corellia again. Ugh. However, there are 3 games that got worse than that. One of which is Star Trek Shattered Universe. Star Trek Shattered Universe is one of those uniquely bad games because, and I know you've played games like this before. Have you ever played a game that's really, really hard because it's badly designed? Not because it's difficult, but because it's crap. Anybody who's played early NES games or early PS1 or N64 games, you know, basically early games in a generation, probably knows exactly what I mean. It's not actually difficult, it's crap. And that's Shattered Universe. So bad that it was rough for all the wrong reasons. Oh my god. And they just kept throwing you at escort mission after escort mission after escort mission. Oh my god. I can't tell you how tired I was of watching the Excelsior get destroyed over and over again. Because holy crap. But even that's only at the number 3 slot. Now here's a funny one. This is our first and I believe only tie. Tied for worst game, gameplay-wise, for worst gameplay is Secret of the Stars and... Now you're wondering why I don't have footage for Secret of the Stars. It's because of the fact that that tie didn't exist when I created this footage. So, you remember this fight? You remember this encounter? This isn't even the boss of this level. Look at this. This is such an encapsulation of everything wrong with Devil May Cry 2's gameplay. You're inside a sphere, which is constantly rotating, which is disorienting as crap. Your lock-on does not work. And so you have to manually attack those little pyramids on the outside. That's your goal. If you kill the skulls, they respawn. Also, if you touch the lightning, you get damage. If you touch the skulls, you take damage. If you touch the sphere, you take damage. This is just one encounter. And yeah, this one encounter took me almost an hour to get through. Yeah, watch my health. Like right there. This freaking encounter. Yeah, get off my screen. It is the hardest part of the game, bar none. And it's all because of bad design. But let's talk about my worst gameplay. I have a lot on this list. I have the Bard's Tale, which is unfairly difficult for all the wrong reasons and is long and boring and slow. I've got Star Wars Bounty Hunter, which physically hurt my hands. I've got Fallout 1, which is an old CRPG. I've got Lufia 1, which is an old JRPG. I've got Psychonauts 1, which is we don't know how to make a video game. I've got Mummy Demastered, which was garbage. I've got Star Trek Shattered Universe, which was garbage. I've got Wolfenstein Youngblood, which was garbage. And I've got Devil May Cry 2, which was garbage. But all of them pale. Because when I look at this list for the worst gameplay and best gameplay and worst story and best story, I just have to check the score because I've already tabulated and enumerated the best and worst. And the worst gameplay... There's a part of this game where there's a town, right? And this town sells low-level gear that you're already past, and really low-level items that are just not that good. Then there's a second town which sells nothing, a third town which sells nothing, and then a dungeon, and then another dungeon, and two bosses in between them. And across this entire arc, which is several hours of gameplay, there's no vendor, no save point, no equipment. You just have to slog it. As I already mentioned, as I talked about on the highlight reel, coming live next week, this is a masterclass in what not to do for game design. And I mean that with legitimate sincerity. If you ever want to make an RPG, I honestly encourage you to study this game, or even watch my own review of it, and not do any of that. I mean that. This is not a joke. This is not a meme. This is a textbook for what not to do in game design. And I mean with total sincerity that I actually learned a lot about game design just going through that, because it never even occurred to me some of the crap that they put into it. Best gameplay. Now, I mean, come on. We've got Titanfall 2, yep. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, yep. Hollow Knight, of course. Stardew Valley, a little surprised by that. God of War 3, which is actually one of my personal favorite games on the gameplay axis. Devil May Cry 5, I mean, come on, of course. Final Fantasy 14. Okay. Hades, little surprised by that. Elden Ring, not surprised by that at all. But the really funny thing is all the games I just mentioned got at most 12 votes. The winner got 45. So absolutely goddamn curb stomping. All of the gameplay for you is... I mean, the deck was stacked. Really. The deck was stacked. This... Come on. Yeah, this is a very, very gameplay game. And I don't know what else to add. Yeah, speaking of which, to go into total contrast, if you want to design games, obviously more of an FPS bent, study Valve's gameplay design. Holy crap. I don't even know how much else to add to this. This is the co-op campaign that I was playing with PAX. And that's the really funny thing. It's not just a great game. It has a whole separate campaign for co-op. That's awesome, by the way, and has co-op friendly features in addition to mandating co-op, which I know sounds like a weird thing, but I mention it because a lot of games will just kind of tack co-op onto a game and not really think about what having another person does to the gameplay. Here they were like, yeah, sure, here's a co-op campaign that specifically utilizes and is designed around there being another player. And you'd be surprised how rare that is. Portal 2 is such a goddamn good game. It was such a treat streaming it. I almost feel sad that it's a 2022 game because it stomped so many categories. Yes, actually, Ross, that was one of the things I fixed at the very beginning of the Cold Dark, or the Long Dark, excuse me. Not the Cold Dark, that's the thing that happened in real life. Anyways, wonderful, wonderful stuff. Moving on. So my picks. So once again, I just looked at the list. Because, again, I enumerate this stuff. So literally going from very high to the best, in order, I can actually list this in order, is God of War 2, which has some great gameplay. Psychonauts 2, which has some really good gameplay. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I know that's going to surprise some people considering how much that campaign sucked, but let's be clear, the gameplay of Smash is legit. It's not my thing. It is a coffee game, but it is very well designed gameplay-wise. Cyber Shadow probably doesn't surprise anybody because I've been gushing about it all day. Plague Tale Innocence. I wasn't expecting Plague Tale Innocence to be as good of a stealth game as it was, but it was, and I loved it. So lots of props to Plague Tale Innocence. If you want a good stealth 'em up, I absolutely recommend that. Titanfall 2, which I was surprised by. I mean, I was looking forward to Titanfall 2, but I was a little bit gobsmacked by how fun that game was to play. The level design, the encounters, the kit, the mechs, really good stuff. Portal 2, the number 3 slot for me, which I feel like I just talked about. At the number 2 slot is Kai Leng. No, sorry. At the number 2 slot is God of War 3. Now, some of you may be looking at me weird, and that means you didn't actually watch that particular stream. I was surprised, too. I don't think I ever really processed how good God of War 3's gameplay is. Because the one I used to replay all the time was God of War 2. And I never actually replayed God of War 3. But when I went through with analysis mode, really discussing it, oh my god, God of War 3 is really, really, really good on the gameplay axis. It is only surpassed by one other game. I don't know what else to add to this, to be completely honest with you. Kit, viscerality, music, encounter design, boss design. I mean, we haven't reviewed it under the current system, Spartan, so I don't know. I doubt it, though. Off the top of my head, I would say no. There are a couple of gameplay flaws in this game. We did give a couple of negatives. I mean, the level design was honestly not that great. But, God, it just nailed everything else so well. Best bosses in the series. The actual controls and the combat, just what do I need to add here? And yeah, actually making V actually work. Loved this game, gameplay-wise. Absolutely adored it. I cannot gush enough about it. I highly recommend you watch this stream, too, if you haven't. Because holy crap. And I almost hate to cut off this song, but we do need to move on. Very, very fun game. Very, very, very good on the gameplay axis. So, story. Worst story. This should be fun. So your roles, what we got here? Okay, so worst story. Plague Tale Innocence. What? That got 0 votes. Stanley Parable. What? Also got 0 votes. I have absolutely no idea what that's on about. Now, okay, so here's the deal. This is the worst story category, okay? So FF14 got 4 votes, or 3 votes, excuse me, for worst story. I have no idea what that's on about. Paradise Killer also got 3 votes. I'm not going to say anything about that. The Dig got quite a few votes. I was surprised because The Dig, I mean, I don't think it had a good story, but at the same time, I was surprised at it being that far down. Tor Trooper. I'm surprised Tor Trooper is that far down the list, to be completely honest with you. Fran Bow. Now, I'm not sure that that's quite fair, but I understand it. Because Fran Bow doesn't have what I would call a bad story. It has a story that I absolutely despise. And there is a distinction between those two things. Fran Bow is really messed up in a way that I can't tolerate. But to call it that bad? Certainly above that we have Devil May Cry 2. Which, yeah, the story of Devil May Cry 2 is really, really bad. Go figure. Just above that, we have Tor Jedi Knight. I'm also surprised by that. If I'm being completely honest, I think Tor Jedi Knight actually is the worst story I've ever reviewed, if we just look at Jedi Knight and not all of Tor. And that's saying something. That's really, really saying something. Yeah. Anyways, so that's that. But then we have the top 2. And the number 2 slot, Mass Effect 3. I don't agree with that. I know that sounds strange, but to call Mass Effect 3 the second worst story of the games we played last year is inaccurate, to be blunt. While, yes, there are specific sections that which are literally some of the worst cutscenes I've ever seen in gaming, that doesn't mean Mass Effect 3 has the worst story. It's kind of like saying, and I'm going to use a direct comparison here. It's like saying Episode 3 of Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith, I think. God, I don't remember the subtitle. It's like saying Episode 3 has one of the worst stories of the prequel trilogy. It's like, I mean, there are individual scenes which are really bad, but to put it at the worst slot because of that? I don't know, that just doesn't track for me. But that's okay, because the worst is, by a large margin, I feel like adding. This... Yes, I did peek. I'm not acknowledging subs during the stream. I saw it. It's on the log. I'll get to it later. So, here's the story for this game. Spoilers. Okay, these are spoilers. Spoilers, 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 alright? So, here's the story of Secret of the Stars. There's this homunculus who was made by a scientist who was trying to create a new type of being. And this new type of being broke out and was filled with hatred for humanity, and so went into the past to conquer the world to kill everyone. That's the plot. None of that's made up. None of that's hyperbole. That's the actual story. Worst story from my perspective. Once again, in order. Wolfenstein Youngblood, which was not really good. Star Trek Shattered Universe, which was worse. Mass Effect 3, kind of. And I actually put an asterisk in my own thing, because the whole, of everything I said earlier, right? Like half of Mass Effect 3, and then you get it. But point being that was put in as a joke, and I shouldn't even joke about it at this point. So no, the actual worst story is not Devil May Cry 2, but it's pretty far up there. No, for me, the actual worst story of the year is... I want to explain this a little bit. Because Secret of the Stars has a negative 28 to story. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, that's not too bad. It is the worst story score I have ever given a game. That isn't an MMO. And you're probably thinking, well, hang on. With how extremely basic the story is, how can it be so bad? Intro, dialogue, localization, cutscene incompetence, absence of characters, absence of themes, plot, world destruction, lack of internal continuity, brickwork, visual storytelling, the outro, the animations, the doodads, the story sequencing, which makes no sense, by the way. For those of you who have actually played through this game, the story sequencing of this game is so bonkers that it puts other games that I've made fun of for story sequencing to shame. Visual continuity. Like there's, and I wrote it right there, there's areas that literally look like you enter a dimensional portal into another realm, as opposed to entering a building. And then there's the ending, which is... yeah. Anyways, let's get some positivity in here. Let's talk about best story. Which is here, yes. Okay, so, best story. Yeah, it ended like 3 separate times, too. It was really just, oh, wow. So, best story, right? Lorewalkers, right? Yes. You suggested Plague Tale Innocence, Psychonauts 2, Lufia 2, the Gamma Quadrant arc from Star Trek Online, Imperial Agent, surprised this is this far down, actually, Valiant Hearts, surprised that's that high up, Sith Warrior from Tor, Heaven's Word from FF14, Endwalker from FF14, Shadowbringers from FF14. There's also The Outer Wilds. I'm a little surprised that's that high up on everybody's list. And, of course, Portal 2. But not too many of them really come anywhere near this, which won by almost half. Good question, Lola Moss. Let's be honest, we all saw this coming. Mass Effect 2, for all that it is, really, really nails the story axis. Animation, voice acting, character, world building, just absolutely stomps on the story axis. Yeah, it's one of the best character-focused games I've ever played. And it's why I've held up Mass Effect 2 as my favorite for so long, and having re-reviewed it, I absolutely stand by my own opinion on that one. Character. Character is just the watchword of this game, and holy crap, it absolutely destroys everything in it. But as much as I just want to keep hearing that song, let's just move on. Let's go to my stuff. So once again, just going down the list in order. You might be surprised by some of these. Story-wise, best story. Mortal Kombat 11. I mean that. If you like a good story and you don't feel like playing a fighting game, do me a favor and go watch my Mortal Kombat 11 stream. It's a surprisingly good story, especially the expansion. Shang Tsung is awesome. So, Mortal Kombat 11 has a really, a surprisingly good story. Devil May Cry 3. Now, this is something that I never realized until I went back through and re-reviewed it. Because Devil May Cry 3 is the best story game of the DMC games. 5 obviously stomps on gameplay, but 3 was the character piece. 3 was the one that really zoomed in on the individuals and worked very well for it. There's like 5 characters in the game, I think. And just awesome stuff there. Super Mario RPG. I probably don't need to actually explain this one. It was the first really big collaboration between Squaresoft and Nintendo. And both of them brought their A games. And no, I haven't Lola Moss, but I've watched Injustice 2. So, yeah, that tracks. Valhalla, a.k.a. VA11 Hall A. This one shocked the hell out of me. Although a visual novel should have a very, very good story. It should. It's its primary focus. I never realized how much I would begin to care and sympathize and empathize with all the characters of Valhalla. I mean, I literally have committed to making them be a reference in the extant in the future. There's going to be a floating bar run by an ex-punk, and that's canon now. That's a thing. Ahem. Plague Tale Innocence. I never thought that a Plague Tale Innocence would nail it so hard on the story axis. I enjoyed the stealth gameplay, but a lot of Plague Tale works really, really well because it's a character study of two people. The plot is okay, and there's some other things that are just kind of whatever. But punk is the category. It's like saying adventurer, Dr. Winter. So yes, she was a solo. It's a character focus on two characters, and it zooms in the camera so hard on these two individuals, and there is so much earnestness and humanity and voice acting and visual presentation and just all of the aspects of story that it absolutely nails. Color me surprised then that the game that had an even better story was Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight, I didn't expect to like the story of a Dark Souls game that much. I really didn't. But here we are. Hollow Knight did a lot right on its story axis, and I think part of what it really did the best was the stuff that it did that wasn't Dark Soulsy. The character moments and the individual cutscenes showcasing and visually presenting the world around it so well. A lot of this boils down to brickwork, obviously, but tons of visual storytelling in Hollow Knight. And yeah, the little character tidbits, just really, really good stuff there. But of course, you're probably expecting some RPGs on the top, and you are, because next we have Lufia 2. Lufia 2 is yet another example of why the intro and the outro matter so much. Lufia 2's intro is strong. Lufia 2's outro is one of the better outros in gaming. Its middle part kind of sucks. Even now, having re-reviewed it, I have trouble sequencing the middle chunk of the game in my mind, because it's forgettable and not great, but it nailed that intro, and it nailed that outro. Which of course brings us to, you guessed it, Mass Effect 1. Mass Effect 1, for all of its flaws and issues, and it had several, is still a really good story, almost entirely built on the world-building side of things. While Mass Effect 1, and I know this is going to raise some hackles, didn't actually do characters all that well. Most of the characters in Mass Effect 1 aren't that great. Rex is kind of a rare exception, and so is Joker. But we have, so not a whole lot of character stuff. And the plot is go beat the bad guy and win. But the world building is what really holds Mass Effect 1 up so well. But of course, Mass Effect 1 doesn't have as good a story as a non-RPG, Psychonauts 2. I almost thought about adding a new Loreium to describe Psychonauts 2. Because, here, let me actually pull up the website for just a second. Hang on, because this is just the gap in quality between Psychonauts 1 and 2 is gargantuan. Psychonauts 1 got a negative 3.29. Psychonauts 2 got 211.84. Think about the gap there. Think about that gap in quality. Really process that for a second. I don't think we've ever seen a game have that huge of a gap. There is definitely... I actually did give Psychonauts 1 the first game label, Rex. But I think part of the problem... I think part of the quality thing going on here is that Psychonauts 2 wasn't just made after, which is expansion effect. It was made like 13 years after. A lot of new tech, a lot of new design. A lot of people have done a lot of things to develop 3D platformers since then. So they had a whole lot to build off of, and it showed. I have some complaints with Psychonauts 2, but holy crap, that game rocked. But even that isn't our best story, because above Psychonauts 2, we have Portal 2. I don't feel like I need to explain this. Portal 2's story is very, very, very good. Portal 2's story is, once again, very zoomed in. You notice several of these games are very zoomed in. Very, very few characters. In fact, yeah, I'm going to go with 3 characters in Portal 2. You could argue that, but let's be clear. There are 3 primary characters in Portal 2. And they zoom in on all 3 of them hard. And that's ignoring all of the visual storytelling and the brickwork and just all the other presentation side of things. But all of this still pales in compared to the actual best story. You know it was coming. What can I add about this? You know what? I can add something about this. I specifically put this little clip in here. That's just Sergeant the Mess Sergeant Gardner. You remember him? You probably do. There's probably some people in chat who remember him. He's some random side character with some random side quest. He only talks to you 3 times, but he's memorable. Hey, look, let's go talk to Chakwas. And let's just have a moment talking with Chakwas. This is Mass Effect 2 in a nutshell right here. How about the engineers down below deck? How about the woman who lost her children during the previous situation and has prejudice against humans as a result of it? How many of you remember the Krogan who's trying to woo the Asari lady? How many of you remember the Solarian who's worried that the daughter who is an Asari that he has raised, who is actually older than him, is going to forget, and she and her mother are going to forget about him when he dies because he's reaching the end of his life? That's Mass Effect 2. That is what Mass Effect 2 does best. It has so many layers and so many characters, and so many of them are good. Never mind, and I'm just talking about the little side characters. This is all on top of the amazing character focus that the main characters get during their recruitment mission, during their loyalty missions, and during just the interactions on the ship. Mass Effect 2 nails the story. It is, I believe, the highest ranking story game I have total right now, and I am correct. Not counting MMOs, that's a different thing. Yeah, the Turian who's trying to date the Quarian. He's trying to get her to ignore her date. Anyways, so that was story. So we've only got 2 categories left. Bear with me, we're almost done. We're almost done. Because what we've got left is Worst Game of the Year and Best Game of the Year. So I just used my golden number for this, but you guys get to vote for whatever you want to here. In the running for Worst Game of the Year, I need to go up to Walker. There we go. In the running for Worst Game of the Year, we have Fallout 1. I mean, you can do whatever you want there. I no judgment. Fallout 1 makes sense to me, though, if I might be bold. I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit. Because Fallout 1 is an old CRPG. Whatever good may be in there, and there is good in there, it's an old CRPG with just so many hassles and problems in playing it. If you can get over all that crap, sure, but that still has to acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of crap to get over. Then we have Fran Bow. Fran Bow doesn't really surprise me being on this list, because while Fran Bow, I think, actually got a net positive golden number for me, it's still Fran Bow. The only game to ever get the Black Licorice label. Now, somebody asked earlier, what is Black Licorice? And I deliberately ignored that because I wanted to answer that here when it's relevant. Black Licorice is something that I can kind of acknowledge other people like, but I cannot process it. I cannot understand it. Because Black Licorice, for those of you not aware in real life, actually triggers my gag reflex. Just smelling it will make me feel nauseous, and I will have to excuse myself from the room. So the idea of someone deliberately seeking out the equivalent of vomit, to me, is something I just can't process. But I know people like Black Licorice. I know several people personally who like Black Licorice. And that's Fran Bow. So it doesn't really surprise me that people put that on the list. Then we have Final Fantasy XIV, specifically ARR. Now, I'm going to go ahead and be honest here, because a cup of coffee doesn't make me literally want to vomit any visceral reaction to it, Kira White Noise. FF14, specifically ARR, makes sense, because FF14, specifically ARR, sucks. Oh, it was a big jump forward from 1.0, and it overall reviewed better than I thought it would, to be completely blunt. But as you all know, I actually put down FF14 for a couple of years because of ARR. I totally understand why that would be that far down. Yeah. After that, we have Mass Effect 3. Once again, this is something that I understand. Obviously, I don't agree personally, but that's because I'm taking into account everything. But for someone to tell me the worst game for them that I played last year, being Mass Effect 3, no, I get it. I cannot tell you how many times over the last decade that I've had people tell me how much Mass Effect 3 not only was a terrible game for them, but ruined the entire franchise for them. I know people who have trouble enjoying Mass Effect 1 and 2 because of 3. So, then we have Mummy Demastered. I feel like I've said all I need to about that, but honestly, that game is astonishingly bad top to bottom. I kind of haven't talked about it a lot, but it really, really, really is terribly bad. It's also a unique game in terms of bad design because it's not just bad, it has the possibility of not soft locking. You can kind of get yourself into a corner on Mummy Demastered to the point where you kind of can't get back out of that corner. And if you're remembering, that's what happened to us. And we didn't finish Mummy Demastered because while I was able to get out of that corner once, barely, I then ran into another corner immediately, and holy crap, it was bad. But we've still got worse, because worse than that is Star Trek Shattered Universe. As I mentioned earlier, a game that's very, very hard by virtue of being very, very bad. How many of you remember starting a mission in Shattered Universe and seconds, less than a minute into the mission, shields at 50% on the Excelsior, which we're defending? In some cases, before we can even reach the enemy to start defending. And then there's the wormhole. Do you remember the wormhole? Because I remember the wormhole. Above that, even worse, we're still getting worse here, is Wolfenstein Youngblood. Yeah, so this is worst overall, right? So when you combine the terrible... Oh no, I'm not going to explain, because the only way I can properly explain it is to just show it to you. And the only way I can do that is say, anyone who has any visual sensitivity, look away from the screen. So Wolfenstein Youngblood has terrible, terrible story and terrible, terrible gameplay. It also kind of killed the Wolfenstein franchise. It's bad gunplay in a shooter, and it's got no real mechanics or gimmicks that help, make it more fun. It's got bad boss design, bad level design, bad encounter design, bad music on top of bad cringy characters who won't shut up, and a terrible plot. Yeah. But hang on. We've got a worse game, and that game is Devil May Cry 2. What can I say that I haven't already said about Devil May Cry 2? Oh my God, Devil May Cry 2 is such a hilariously, shockingly bad game. It's just really, really, really bad. If you don't understand, just go watch the highlight reel. Just go watch the highlight reel for DMC2. But try to be shocked when I say that the worst game of the year from you, winning by quite a margin actually, is... I'm not actually being facetious. Whoops, is me accidentally letting me talk from the past. Sorry about that, past me. I know this is shocking, really. Shocking. Hey, Nemesis. This is historically bad. This is a garbage game. This is how you do not do game design and story design. It's so bad on both axes that it actually set some records on both axes. When we got to as we were playing through Secret of the Stars, some of you remember this, I kept saying, it's not going to beat Mega Man X7. It's not going to beat Mega Man X7. It can't beat Mega Man X7. It beat Mega Man X7. It became a race towards the end. Like, hang on. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. Moving on. My worst game of the year. Let's go down to Runner. So once again, I just listed these in order of golden number. So at the least worst. Romance of the Three Kingdoms 14. This was especially particular for me because I was looking forward to that game. I was actually like, oh, this is going to be fun. Like, this will be an interesting game, and we'll go through it. And because I like 4X games, and I like the Romance of the Three Kingdoms era. And the game sucked. It was bad. It was a bad 4X light with no actual tactical layer. It was awful. And yeah, it's specifically bad because of how not it was. It was an extraordinarily short stream, not because it was, not because I was sick of it, but because we had finished streaming it. There was so little content that we had successfully streamed all the content of the game in just a few hours. And it's just like, that's it? But worse than that, and I know this is going to raise some hackles for me, but for me, worse than that, I know it's going to raise some hackles, is Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Star Wars Bounty Hunter gets a little bit of a nudge to even worse because of the physical pain thing, because of the fact that playing the game was actually causing me that level of physical distress. So I don't have anything else to add to that, just oof. Moving on to The Bard's Tale. Bad dungeon design in a dungeon crawler with no music and awful audio design and a terrible plot and terrible characters and mostly bad voice acting. Worse than that, however, was Mummy Demastered. I feel like I already explained why Mummy Demastered is so far down on the bottom of the list, but I want to add one last little tidbit. Mummy Demastered is a roguelite platformer by WayForward who does some really good stuff where you have a freaking autocannon and like a pseudo-resurrection mechanic, and they made that suck. That takes talent, That's impressive. But even worse than that, Wolfenstein Youngblood. By the way, it's funny how much of the legendarily bad games were from the last year. All of this is just in order of golden number. So Wolfenstein Youngblood, oh, yeah, exactly, Rex. Wolfenstein Youngblood, I've already talked about it. It's garbage. It's a garbage game with a garbage story. Which moves me on to Star Trek Shattered Universe. Which, if you're paying attention to this, of the games, this is still only the third worst, but is still one of the worst games I've reviewed under the current system. It is bad on top of bad on top of bad. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4. It is still, Star Trek Shattered Universe is still the 5th worst game I have ever reviewed. Under the current system, obviously. That is some impressive company right there. And yet, there's still worse than that because there's still Devil May Cry 2. Devil May Cry 2. It's really kind of funny. It's really kind of funny just how bad Devil May Cry 2 really is. Because it's the wrong kind of difficulty. It's boring. It's got a garbage story which is terribly told. And there's nothing engaging or fun or interesting about it. There's no redeeming features for DMC2, other than the fact that it directly led to the creation of DMC3. And yes, try to be shocked at the actual worst game of the year in terms of golden number. Now, I want to say something here. So, at a certain point in the game, and I chose this clip very deliberately. Hi, Oculus. Please, you didn't put that towards anything in your comment. Damn it, Oculus. Why would you do that? This game was so bad, that what I had to do, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit, I had to sit here and play Mega Man X. This is a 37-minute clip. I had to play Mega Man X to show you how to do visual design on a SNES game. But that felt unfair. So I pulled out another game. Now, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is well known for not having good visual design. And I actually pulled up, some of you were there for this, you know this, but I pulled up Mystic Quest with the specific intent to prove that what bad game design was, right? To really go down the list of this, because I figured FFMQ had worse visual design, but it didn't. It didn't. It actually had better visual design. I'm going to go, because we started talking about grass. That kept being a thing. And I showed off this screen right here. Visual design of this goddamn town is still better than Secret of Stars in terms of color palette, in terms of layout and thought, in terms of visual storytelling, in terms of repeated pattern and tileset, in terms of animation. And then this is what Secret of the Stars looks like. No hyperbole, no nothing. All of this whole rant, by the way, 37 minutes. This whole rant's in the highlight reel. Please watch it. This Mystic Quest is basic, but it is designed. I'm still getting pissed about it. It's been months. I'm still pissed about it. There is actual design to Mystic Quest. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a teaser for the highlight reel, okay? Because then we started getting even worse. So I pulled out the big guns. I brought out FF6. Because FF6 is one of the best looking games ever. I stand by that, by the way. But then I was like, hang on. This isn't fair, obviously. So, okay. All right. Let's do the game that was made as a tech demo for the SNES as a console. I do, actually, Leonard. Because this game, which I'm going to say this one more time because it really needs to be said, was done as a tech demo of the SNES and predates Secret of the Stars by a couple of years. Has better, but hang on. Then I really pulled out some big guns and said, hey, you want to see some visual design? Look at this. And hey, I'm going to slow this down. Because this is astonishingly good visual design for how incredibly basic it is. And absolutely stomps anything Secret of the Stars could ever possibly do. But we still weren't done. Because then I pulled out some big guns. Someone said, hang on, what's a really good looking game? I was like, oh, okay, sure. Cool. Here's how you do visual design in a freaking SNES game. This is Secret of Mana. Now, Som has a lot of problems. It's actually a very problematic game. I look forward to reviewing it someday because it's probably not going to score very well. But on the visual sprite work design of this game looks gorgeous today. And I don't remember the exact dates, but I believe this came out in the States the same year that Secret of the Stars came out. Picture that for 5 seconds. Now I'm going to stop here. We're only halfway through. I'm going to save some of this for the review, for the highlight reel. But like I said, I tunneled down and really started going into detail in a level that I normally don't, just to emphasize how bad one aspect of Secret of the Stars was. Game of the Year. This is it. This is the big one. So, are you going to work properly? Hey, there we go. Okay, so some suggestions for Game of the Year. Obviously, Wasteland 3 with 0 votes. Hollow Knight with 1 vote. A Plague Tale Innocence with 1 vote. Mortal Kombat 11 with 1 vote. I've talked about most of these games, which is why I'm just kind of pushing through here. Valhalla, a little surprised as a Game of the Year, but I'm still with it. 2 votes. Mass Effect 3, 2 votes. I'm kind of ignoring donations during the thing, Oculus, if you're wondering why I haven't bowed or anything. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to remember, I have to write that down because you didn't put it in the comment. I was going to rely on the log because you didn't put it in the comment. So, yeah, anyways. There. Dragon Age Block. Okay, cool. Thank you. You're cool. You're awesome. Thank you, Oculus. I will interrupt just for you and for no other reason. No more donations. Mass Effect 3 for Game of the Year. I'm a little surprised by that. But what I'm not surprised by is that it's that far down on the list. So above that, we have the Stanley Parable Deluxe Edition. That one doesn't really surprise me either. That was a very fun game. Short and kind of one note. And admittedly, if you don't like the jokes, then you're not going to like the game. Understandable. But still a game I could see several people saying as their favorite. Then we had Psychonauts 2, which, as I mentioned earlier, got over 200 on the golden number, which just is astonishingly good. Holy crap. We then, of course, have Titanfall 2, another game that I was gobsmacked at how good it was. Lufia 2, I'm a little surprised at how many votes Lufia 2 got. That's not a small number of votes. and Elden Ring. I am a little surprised at how high up Elden Ring is on this list. Only a little. Above that, we have Devil May Cry 5. Now, I'm stopping here because Devil May Cry 5 has 9 votes towards it. And the next highest one, which is Portal 2, has 24. So, Devil May Cry 5, Portal 2. But Portal 2 is only number 3 for you guys. So, in number 2 slot, we have... Just going to drag this out for a second to be a dick. Final Fantasy XIV. That one does not surprise me. There's enough people in that headspace as part of that community who really like that game. And again, what everyone values and what everyone doesn't value is up to you. That's obviously its own thing. But I think enough people love the story of that game and enjoy or tolerate the gameplay of that game to call it their yada yada yada. But even FF14 has almost half the votes of the game that actually won. And that game is the game that I forgot to unmute. There we go. This, by contrast to some of my earlier comments, does not surprise me at all. This is Mass Effect 2. Is it a flawed game? Absolutely. We gave this game quite a few negatives as we went through it. Like, come on. Yeah, this was a bit obvious. Let's just be honest with ourselves. This was a bit of a stacked year. And not on purpose, because if you remember, the idea to do a Game of the Year thing only showed up in December. So this wasn't on purpose, but this was a bit of a stacked year. Both on the good and the bad thing. Secret of the Stars is going to sweep the bads, and Mass Effect 2 is going to sweep the goods. And if it isn't, Portal 2 is going to sweep the goods. And then we have FF14. Like, come on. What more can I say about this game that I have not already said? I'm going to pause that there so you can enjoy Martin Sheen. Because now I have to talk about my Game of the Year. So once again, I'm just going to go in order of the golden number. I'm going to give a little bit of a tidbit for each of these. So we have... whoops, I didn't actually mean to do that. Sorry. Stop. There we go. Sorry. Actually, I'm pretty sure a lot of people do, Blue F. Alex. At least that's what I get in my YouTube comments. So at the bottom of the great, we have A Plague Tale: Innocence. A game with a very good, tightly focused story on 2 individuals, which is very well done on that axis. And then you add fantastic stealth gameplay on top of it, and some really fun and innovative powers and abilities that made the game fantastic. Above Plague Tale: Innocence, we have Mortal Kombat 11. I know that there are people who are going to be shocked by this being as high on the list as it is, but I stand by it. Every time I've looked back at Mortal Kombat 11, there's been some part of my brain that says, am I sure about that? And every time I challenge it, you know me, I like to challenge to make sure something is valid, the answer comes back, yes. A very good fighting game with very good controls, very tight responsive system, wonderful tutorial, and of course, the great expansion. The expansion elevated it quite a bit. It's one of the very few expansions that boosted the score up instead of down. And of course, the story was really good and really engaging. There were a couple of sidesteps. Someone mentioned the Sindel scene earlier, and I agree, that scene was stupid. But other than a couple of sidesteps and a couple of trippings, like the main villain being stupid, the game was really, really good. But it was not as good as God of War 3. As I have already mentioned, this one surprised me a bit, because God of War 3 does have some moments. Story-wise, though, it's surprisingly good, mostly because it really tries to actually flesh out Kratos as a person in a way that, honestly, wasn't really done up until God of War 3. There were occasional, pokes at, there's one scene where they try to flesh out Kratos as an individual, and then he'd just go back to being Kratos. 3 actually had an honest-to-God arc going through it, no pun intended. And 3 also, while it had some missteps on the story axis, completely freaking nailed it on the gameplay axis. Which, of course, brings us to Devil May Cry 5. Now, Devil May Cry 5 is, of course, the king Thought I could get through that without sneezing, but holy crap. Devil May Cry 5 had good story. V was awesome. It's the first time Virgil was an actual freaking character. Appreciate the irony of what I just said, please. But also actually turned Nero into an interesting and good character. And even did some good stuff with Dante. And then, of course, there's the gameplay. Yes, the level design sucks, and we've already acknowledged that. But honestly, that's kind of the only thing they got wrong. So many of the other aspects of the gameplay shined and just smashed that score up there. Which leads us, of course, I've lost track. This is Plague Tale, Mortal Kombat 2, God of War 3, Devil May Cry 5. So we're up to Psychonauts 2. Now, I'm going to get some hackles for saying Psychonauts 2 is better than Devil May Cry 5. But it is! Psychonauts 2 only stumbled twice. One minorly and one pretty badly. I'll give you that. There was the one moment which was pretty bad. But other than that, that whole game was joy. This is probably a little bit of my own personal bias because I love platformers. It's one of my bags. But it's rare to see a 3D platformer which is that awesome. In fact, I can only think of 3. Mario Odyssey, A Hat in Time, and Psychonauts 2. And that is a hell of a group to be a part of. But above Psychonauts 2, we have Mass Effect 2. Some of you may or may not be surprised by Mass Effect 2 not being at the top of the list. But, well, Mass Effect 2 is fantastic. As usual, one of the things that I always do is I consider all the aspects of a game. And there are elements of Mass Effect 2 which do drag it down compared to some other games. And, well, like I already said, this was a stacked year. Now, I'm going to pause and say that there's a little bit of a bonus thing over on the side here. And that bonus thing, well, I'll just do this. Whoops, wrong one. There it is. I mean, MMOs are different, and we tend to count MMOs as different when it comes to the golden number. So even though FF14 got a 437.35, that's only really relevant compared to other MMOs. So it can't technically be considered my game of the year because the scale is different. So I'm mentioning it because it's my best MMO of the year. Ironic, since all 3 MMOs we reviewed this last year. I do hope to add more to that list, a couple more to that list. And now time to say Mass Effect 2, which, no, I'm just joking, because the actual game of the year, you're probably extremely unsurprised by this. No, the actual game of the year, for me, is The Giant. What else can I say about this game? A masterclass in story presentation and game design. A game that we could just sit and I could just sit right now and replay this game right now and enjoy it exactly as much, if not more, than the previous times I have played this game. This game is so high up on my list, including with the golden number, that I think it's actually currently the top. Yeah, it is actually. This is actually the best game in terms of golden number. The top 327.83 golden number. Not a lot of games have gone above 300. In fact, only 2 games I have reviewed that are not MMOs have gone above 300. This is one of them. Portal 2 is Portal Goddamned 2. It wouldn't surprise me if this ends up being in the top 3 or 5 or whatever, ever. The only games I can see ever actually contesting this are Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, and Grand Theft Auto V. The best game that came out in 2022? I don't know what came out in 2022. I don't think Dragon Age Origins is going to get quite this high. I think there's enough that's going to drag it down. It'll be very high, but I'm not sure it'll beat the 300 marker. I know Witcher 3 won't, because Witcher 3's gameplay score is going to tank. Did we play any games? No, we played 2. We played 2 games that came out in 2022. Elden Ring and Grounded. I'll give you a hint as which one won that particular contest. I hope so too, Crazy Norse. Yeah, I don't think Half-Life 2 is going to beat Portal 2. I really don't. I mean, come on. Actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, there is one other game that might be in contest for the 300 plus range. Twilight Princess, which we'll be covering as part of the Zelda blog. Stanley Parable, the deluxe edition, was 2022. I'll give you that. So, there you go. So we're up to 3 games that we played that came out. Kind of. If we're going to add asterisks, then we could add patch 6.1 from Endwalker, which we played like the week after it came out. And I think there was another asterisk there. It was an expansion or something. I don't remember what it was. I don't know. You get my point. We didn't play a lot of new games. That's just sort of the nature of the system, and I'm okay with that. I'm just double checking the things. Now you got me curious. I don't remember when the Wasteland 3 DLC came out. Oh yeah, Tor. That's right. We did play the latest Tor patch, which came out in 2022. That's right. Again, asterisk. Of course they will, Nemesis. In March. A lot of these games had expansions or DLCs, and I'm not sure exactly when they came out. Cadence of Hyrule, Devil May Cry 5, Devil May Cry 4. Also, Star Trek Online, I think, technically. I have no idea when Paradise Killer came out. So if you want to add some asterisks, there's a bunch of them. But of that list, I'm pretty sure Grounded stomps all of them. And that's because it does. Grounded... hang on, where is Grounded? Grounded got a 107.81. I don't think anything else even came close to that. So... that's true, we didn't play the Terran arc. And we never will. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the LGA. I hope you had fun. This took a while to put together, to get all the footage and the audio synced and queued, so I could just have this little thing in the background here. Because I was thinking to myself, well, I could be garbage like the Video Game Awards, but you know, I feel like I could do better than the Video Game Awards. And that's because I can. So, if some shark comes on board and starts talking about Clinton all of a sudden, you can officially say I'm worse. But no, I think we've officially gone over the better line here. Oh yeah, and make sure to buy the new Rage Shadow... I'm done. I do kind of want this to be a thing. We'll refine the categories a little bit when it comes to, you know, the end. Because we need some refinement. We're trying to figure out some specifics here. Forgive me. But yes, my apartment literally has better security than the VGA. That's not a joke. I have a huge headache, and I am very hungry. So I'm going to go and take a break, and then immediately get back to work, because I have a lot of work to do. I'll see at least some of you tomorrow for the Justified Streaminations. Otherwise, I'll see you at the end of the long dark.